call this workshop to order. I wish to welcome everyone to the Superintendent's Workshop being held in the Joe N. Idelett Jr. TEC. I ask that out of respect for everyone, please silence all electronic devices. Also, if you have any material you wish to share with all board members, please give that to our assistant, Ms. Nancy Asplin. Dr. Moore, the floor is yours to begin the workshop and explain the purpose of the workshop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The intent of this workshop is to provide updates and as well as items that will be coming for the board for approval. This first item that we are presenting, not necessarily for approval, but in fact is an update. And it's an update on our partnership with the Learning Alliance. And as a board, you all know, it is one of our longest standing partnerships that we have. We are like-minded in the work that we do in order to ensure every single student has the opportunity not only to engage in meaningful education, but ensure by the time that they finish third grade, they are in fact 90% of them or more reading at grade level. And this is a conversation that has been ongoing. And as we've had this conversation over the years, we began to question ourselves, why do we have to wait so long? Is there work that we can collectively do really to create a space where we're showing the rest of the world and our community that it can be done? And it isn't a pipe dream, it isn't something that's going to be light years away, that if we are able to organize ourselves in a very specific way, we can in fact create a school that can serve as a beacon of hope, can serve as an opportunity for all other schools within our district to learn from and ultimately begin to accelerate and expand the systems and the practices that are present at this particular school, really to serve as a hub for learning across our entire community. Engaged in that conversation also was what are some of the absolute barriers and obstacles that stand in the way of making sure this is a reality for all of our children. And one of those major barriers or obstacles is in fact teacher retention. Having the opportunity to go out and recruit educators, and Doc Jones, you say it all the time, the percent of graduates that do not come from the School of Education as they walk into the career of teaching and learning, they don't have the background. And when you just give them the keys to the school door and a pacing guide and say, good luck with that, we'll come in a few times a year, we have a tremendous retention problem. So this initiative, creating a Moonshot school, is in fact to create a system, a structure, a hub of development, but at the same time, hyper-focus in on providing the needed support for our teachers so we don't lose them at the end of the year. So we've embarked on a journey that we implemented this year. So we spoke about where would we do this? And we didn't pick the easiest school. We could easily said, you know what, let's go to one of our magnet schools that hover right around 80%, and we can knock it out and get it done in a year and be at 90%. We identified Vero Beach Elementary School, which was a process, and schools actually applied or sought out the opportunity to serve or to pilot this program. So this year we have been at at Vero Beach Elementary School working really hard. So I'm going to go through a presentation and then I'm going to conclude by acknowledging some of the Learning Alliance folks who are in the room who have partnered with us in this work. And I know I have a list right here, but I think they've continued to come in over the course of time, so we're just going to have a big hoorah. So what does it take? You know, it takes a school that is founded in the science of reading and the science of reading and implementation science. Not only the science of reading, but understand how you bring the science of reading to life in classrooms. Really ensuring that we're growing educators, that once we make an investment in them, that investment is there to impact children each and every single school year. We want to ensure that classroom environments are engaging, they're fun, they're connected, they're spaces where students walk in, and both their parents and the child themselves know, in this space I am safe, I am cared for, and I can focus in and have a really fun time learning. Also, growing students. We are really intentional this year. We're in implementing what we call our acceleration team, which is to accelerate outcomes not only for our educators, but to accelerate outcomes for our students. So robust core instruction. If you get core instruction right the first time, you don't have to go back and reteach. So we want to make sure our educators really understand how to provide core instruction as we introduce students to new standards. They have the opportunity to grapple with those standards, understand those standards, and ultimately master them. And then at the same time, providing the additional support, so tiered interventions, really individualizing education to meet the specific needs of children in one class. So gone are the days of one specific lesson that all children get, but we have the ability to differentiate across the needs of all of the learners in the class. And then bringing literacy to life. Just not sitting in a classroom and regurgitating information, but really looking at some of those skills that students need to be successful in the real world. Creating real solid professional development that isn't something in addition to, but it's just the way of work for a teacher. Constantly focusing in on their own development through the way in which they do that work, and then providing students multiple opportunities not only to show what they have learned on an assessment, but ultimately bring it to life through showcases and displays. Our theory of action really has been to create systems and practices, professional expertise aligned to the science of reading and implementation science are utilized with fidelity to support with increased human capital. Really making an investment in those who are standing in front of our children. We know if we can invest in them, we can pour into them, they'll have the opportunity and skills to pour into our educators. When you're looking at some of our accelerated impacts, what do we want to create? We want to empower educators who understand what good instruction looks like, and they have the ability to maximize the full potential of all students. We want systems and structures that are done in not only a proactive approach, but a data-driven approach. So not waiting for a mid-year assessment or not waiting 6 weeks into the school year, but we want to be able to make real-time decision-making as close to children as possible, putting those systems in place to ensure that as soon as we implement instruction, we have the opportunity to step back, evaluate the impact, and make any shifts or modifications. We want this to be a nationally recognized model. We want this to be the answer that not only we could implement across our school system, but other districts could replicate. So this is innovative in our thinking. We're being extremely intentional about how we're growing educators in real time to build not only outcomes for those students, but to use this school as a hub. And you will talk about that in some of the coming slides, really allowing educators from other schools to come in and observe these systems, observe these structures, observe the instructional practices, our high-yield strategies being implemented with fidelity. It's one thing to talk about it, it's one thing to read about it, but when you see it live being done in practice in a school within your community, you gain a much better or deeper understanding on how, in fact, it is to be done. And then a culture of high expectations. We understand if you want to transform a school, high class, high quality, engaged educators who are standing in front of our students. That's the key. That's the secret. And we may have the skill and the will, but we need to make sure that we provide them all of the support so they're continuing to grow under one common goal, a culture of high expectations to ensure this, in fact, is the outcome that we are providing for our students. So as you know, we started this work last year. This year, last year meaning at the end of this particular year. This really was an initiative looking at our acceleration team. Our acceleration team has been at Vero Beach Elementary School all year long, really providing additional interventions to students, cultivating what we call our playbook. Our playbook are some of the high-yield strategies, our research-proven strategies, when done with high levels of fidelity, will in fact produce results, while at the same time creating some of the structures that we will have in place for next year. So a significant amount of additional support provided for teachers, an additional amount of support provided for students this year, and then recreating the foundations as we move into next school year. As we jump into next school year, we are really going to begin to implement this model. And there will be opportunities for us to bring in schools from across the district to see some of these strategies being done. We will be looking at a credentialing system where as you walk into a specific classroom, you'll know the strategies that have been mastered by this particular teacher. We'll be able to design professional development across our system to allow children to come in, and we'll use the acceleration team to build on the success or the capacity that it built this specific year. So this next year, we move into implementation, and as we go into Model 3, we want to be a self-sustaining model that really is a foundation for success within our school system. It is a school that allows us every single opportunity in looking at parental engagement, doing it differently, and looking at how we're onboarding parents, doing it differently, looking at how we're connecting and maximizing relationships between the home and the school. This is that extra support that we need to have the time and the resources to answer all of those questions that need to be answered. So I kind of want to talk through some of the impacts as you look at this specific year. And we started a few weeks before summer school started with the acceleration team. And what we're looking at here is the number of contacts for our instructional coaches that have provided support. And we provide support, full coaching cycle, which is the lesson design all the way through the implementation of it, a mini coaching cycle, which would be a segment or a piece of the lesson. Teacher assistance would be parallel teaching or helping implement within a small segment or different segments of the lesson. And as you look at this, we've listed similar schools across the district, and you can see at the bottom, 16% of all coaching support has gone to Vero Beach Elementary School. So that validates the additional support that we're providing. That's capacity building. That is support that is really building and enhancing the skills of the educators who will be able to take what they've learned this year and not only put it to practice this year, but continue to put it to practice in the upcoming years. So you can see a high level of investment going into our educators. And as we grow in or focus in specifically to our K1 and 2, that's where the majority of that support is being provided. Why? Because if you get them where they need to be by third grade, we're ultimately saving money and accelerating the success of students. So once again, focusing in on K1 and 2, you see 22% of the support that has been provided across those grade levels has been fact and provided to Vero Beach Elementary School teachers. So once again, we're seeing the fruits of those labors and the quality of instruction. Now, when you look across the school specifically in K1 and 2, this is a validation of really putting our resources where we need to have our resources. And you may say, well, that's common sense, Dr. Moore. Of course you would. That really hasn't been the normal way of work because you all know accountability is grades 3, 4, and 5. And that's where your bread is kind of buttered, for lack of a way of saying it. Your accountability happens in 3, 4, and 5. You put all of your resources of support in 3, 4, and 5. What if we never had to deploy those resources and we got it right in K1 and 2? That's a theory of action that we know. If you're willing to be bold and courageous enough to support to, you can see those results take place. And this is a validation of that, where 441 of the contacts have been in fact in K1 and 2, where 3, 4, and 5, only 210, but still a significant amount of support of 651 coaching supports. This is specifically to ELA. So we're very proud of that. We're not only saying it's important, these are the numbers that validate probably for the first time in a long time, we're really putting our beliefs to action in K1 and 2 and providing that support to build that capacity for our teachers. Now, when you look here, we're going to compare to the district. And the next couple slides will, in fact, compare to the district. This includes our magnet schools, the schools that are around high 70s and 80s in terms of students scoring at proficiency. So in a typical comparison year to year, VBE should not be outperforming the district. And that's in some of the coming slides that you'll see. What you're looking at here is some of our high yield strategies that we focus in on: collaborative planning, differentiation, engagement, environment, monitoring, and standard-based instruction/tasks. And you can see in just our walkthroughs or observation or data collecting on collaborative planning, 100%. I want to come back to differentiation. Engagement, significantly higher than the district. Environment, higher than the district. Monitoring, standards-based instruction. Theory of action: if these are the strategies that, when implemented with high levels of fidelity, yield results, the more frequently we see them being done correctly, the better the results will be. Differentiation is not a strategy in which they're addressing this specific year. You need to have all those other elements in place first. So as we move into next school year, that will be a focus not only for VBE, but across the entire district. You can't move right to differentiation. It is the top rung of the ladder or the steps that we need to get to. So that is by design. Now looking a perspective from the field. So I've given some theories of action, I've given some words, but ultimately at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is build world-class educators and making sure that those world-class educators are happy, those world-class educators feel supported, and they're absolutely master teachers. So what we'll play now is someone who's been the beneficiary of the support that's been provided by the acceleration team and folks at Vero Beach Elementary School. And I just don't know if I'm the one that clicks it or...
We are so excited to introduce and showcase one of our most fabulous kindergarten teachers, Deb Henry. She's in her second year here at Vero Beach Elementary, and she is one of our teachers who has really embraced the coaching from the acceleration team, which is funded by the Learning Alliance. And so we're really excited to see her progress since she's begun here at Vero Beach Elementary, and then where she can go with continuing this coaching. When I first met Deb Henry, she was a cafeteria manager at another school in our district, Citrus Elementary, and just by one simple phone conversation with her, I knew she had the spark and the drive, and definitely that passion and that vibe that would fit here good at Vero Beach Elementary.
I was a cafeteria manager at Citrus for 3 years, and I decided that I wanted to be in a child's life more. So I took the jump and decided to be a teacher, and VBE was my home. Ms. Matheny took a chance on me, so I'm very grateful for that. I chose to become an educator because I want to help children see the world in a different light and basically just love school and teach them how to read.
So when we got her first into the classroom, you know, she had no formalized instruction as far as education. She was kind of a fish out of water, but she has been a lifelong learner, a teacher who has just accepted all feedback, all help, support of her team, support of the acceleration team through coaching. And we are very happy to announce that she actually was able to see significant growth in her student achievement from the first state assessment back in August until December. Her students grew 20 percentage points, and she is about at 80% proficient for her kindergarten students. So we are very excited to see that trend continue and hitting that 100% target of her students being proficient at the end of this school year.
I would like to thank Lindsay Matheny. She gave me a chance, which by paper you would probably look at me and say, wow, she's from food service jumping into teaching. And then my band directors in high school, Eric Allen and Joel Pagan, they really guided me in education and made me really love and enjoy school.
We're very excited for her, happy for our students, and just the outcomes that with coaching, how you can improve your practice.
So that says it much better than I say it. A homegrown educator, through the support, we're able to make sure quality, high-level instruction taking place. Just kind of share some closing data points, once again comparing VBE to the district, and this is looking at some progress monitoring data that we have. So when you look at the district from PM1 to PM2, we're getting ready for PM3, and in the next coming weeks, you can see VBE is only one growth point away from the district average. Once again, that is significant because when you look at where some of the students and some of the schools within the district are starting, that is an outlier. Then you look specifically about the interventions, the students who are being exposed to the interventions, a growth of 77. That is significant. That's a validation when you're providing those resources and support, you're drastically accelerating those students. And these are kindergarten students. So getting them on grade level is so important because we won't have to spend the additional resources in first grade and second grade and third grade. And looking at first grade, once again, you see VBE is actually outpacing the district, which is significant. And once again, significant growth above and beyond significantly expanded growth for where the interventionists are serving. by a significant amount. So once again, where you're seeing the support, you're seeing the growth of students. And then you're looking at STAR literacy assessment. This is for second grade, once again, significant growth where the interventionists are, and only 2 clicks behind the district for Vero Beach Elementary School. This is the iReady diagnostic. This is the most current data that we have. And you can see K1 and 2, we're looking at the district. K, the same growth, which is significant, but in 1 and 2, ultimately exceeding the growth of the district by either 6 percentage points or 4 percentage points, depending on the specific grade. So we're beginning to see Vero Beach Elementary School begin to outpace other districts, and that is because of the accelerated support to both students as well as, and more importantly, to our educators. So when you look at some of the expectations, this really is a hub where the science of reading serves as our foundation. We continue to say and talk about the science of reading, but we want to be implementation experts in the system that we're creating. A very systematic approach, clearly defined best practices, clearly evident best practices, a solid framework that is in place where everyone clearly understands not only what's important, but how we're going to do this work to ultimately accelerate achievement for students. We're looking forward to scaling up as we go into next school year. We will use a whole child approach. You will see integrated multidisciplinary teaching, showcases taking place, differentiated learning opportunities taking place, a culture of ongoing professional development, authentically connected throughout the school day, and then partnerships with parents where it's just not, when you're available, but every opportunity that we have parents in the school, we're going to connect them and engage them in ways in which have never been done before. So this is a lot, and it has been a significant amount of work over the course of the last school year. But I think all this additional work that we've done in terms of problem solving with the Learning Alliance, with the school site leadership team, with the acceleration team, my district team, Ms. Becerra, Ms. Garcia, we're meeting every week in some form or fashion about where we are and where we want to get to in terms of creating this model. And I will say it again, this is very, very unique. To have the opportunity to drastically accelerate the attainment of 90% of students scoring at grade level by the end of 3rd grade in a very, very challenging school is a bold, courageous initiative. And I think some of the progress that we've seen in year 1 is absolutely very, very encouraging. And I cannot thank the Learning Alliance enough for their partnership as well as their push. They really believe in this work, have a high expectation for this work, and through continued partnership, we will make it a reality. Some immediate next steps for us is this presentation we're having today. This Thursday, you all know it's on your calendars, we'll be going to a Presbyterian church, and we're going to have just a community outreach around literacy. A all call for literacy where we collectively will communicate the message to our community that literacy should not just be a priority for a school system or a school district, but for the entire community. And as a member of this community, it must be a priority regardless of the role that you fill within this community. You need to understand how you connect to making literacy a priority within Indian River County. So it's just not the Learning Alliance's responsibility, the school system's responsibility. It's a collective expectation for our entire community. We will go out and make that declaration together on Thursday. In our upcoming school board meeting, we will be presenting and signing off on a proclamation, once again reinforcing the importance of literacy. A number of our, whether it's our county or city chambers or commissioners have already signed this proclamation. Ours will be very similar but different because we are the school system. But it is the totality of the community coming together, all making a stance for this work. So There's a lot more people here from when I started. So I don't want to put Ms. Ray on the spot, but he puts me on the spot all the time. So Ray, if you would like to say a few words, where are you? Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Moore, and thank you, school board members, for this opportunity. I can't tell you how excited we are at the Learning Alliance to have this partnership with the school board and also with our MCAN partners joining in on all this. We are absolutely dedicated to trying to get this 90% goal. I don't have enough years left. We have got to accelerate this thing. We have got to accelerate this thing. We can't allow so many of these kids fail so early in their lives. And so it really is a mission for all of us to try to make sure that our kids all have the opportunity to succeed. Doesn't mean the same outcomes, but at least give them the same opportunity to succeed. So we've been blessed to have a wonderful community who has bought into this program for the last 13 years now. We do have a community that cares deeply, and they're on board with this. We have, because of them, we've been able to move our budget up almost by a third. And so we're out trying to support the school district the best way we can. So thank you for your support on this. We hope to continue to deliver great results to you. So thanks for all your support.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, team. I just want to give you guys a round of applause for all your support. Great way to get people to the workshop, I guess. Madam Chair, that is our presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Board member comments? I'd just like to say a few words. When I came back to Indian River County in 2014, I began to learn about the Moonshot and Learning Alliance, and I have learned a lot. Combining the science of reading with what we're doing is key. Mentoring our teachers is absolutely essential. I guess the one question I'll have is, when do we get into all of our other schools, Dr. Moore? But that's something we can talk about. The Literacy Summit on Thursday, I've been a part of, I believe, 2 of those, and it is a wonderful, wonderful coming together, as Mr. Oglethorpe said, as far as bringing our community together, because it takes all of us. It takes all of us united to make sure that is our main goal. We want our students to be ready by the end of 3rd grade, a determiner for high school graduation, and just from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for this partnership, and I want to give a shout out to Deb Henry. She was a 2009 Shark graduate, and I remember when she told me she was going to go into teaching after food service, and she's just done an excellent job. And thank you for giving her that opportunity, because together we can make it work. Thank you very much, Dr. Moore. Moonshot and literacy. The Learning Alliance, any other comments? Ms. Rosario?
Thank you so much. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and for everyone who is here in support of the Learning Alliance and our partnership with the Moonshot Moment. Dr. Moore, if you can go back to a couple of slides ago, there was where you showed the growth from kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. Yeah, right there. Oh. No, that was the one. So I'm going to hold here for just a second and then ask you if you can just explain a little bit more about what you mentioned with regard to differentiating. Did I hear that differentiating was not on the table now, or that it is on the table? We're waiting to do that. I'm not sure. Can you just expand a little bit on what you mentioned with that?
So when you, from a systems perspective, that's actually our high yield strategy. So we work each specific school to identify what one skill do they need to be working on the most, and that would be the skill that has the most influence on all of the others. So in looking at how we're going to get to differentiation, you can't get to differentiation until you have solid planning in place. You can't get to differentiation until you have solid monitoring in place. So it's a systematic approach where we're looking at which strategy we want to focus in on to bring to what we call sustainable. So it's a sustainable practice, meaning it is done throughout the entire organization, and then you build upon that. So in terms of looking at the school site specific plans, very few schools are they planning for it? Yes. Is it observable at absolute the highest level? That's what we're assessing. That's the only way you would assess it. We're still working on that specifically, but it is by design, yes.
Well, because when I come here and I look at kindergartners who are now in the spring at 83%, our first graders are at 60%. I know they're not the same students moving forward, but our first graders are 60%, and our second graders are 63%. So from kindergarten, the concern in the past has always been, why aren't they sustaining the same growth? So if we move forward, the assumption is, moving forward, that focusing on differentiation will allow teachers and administrators to be able to zero in on what it is for each individual student that they would need in order to maintain that growth from kindergarten to first and then to second and so on and so forth.
Nicely said. Because the reality is that's exactly the Learning Alliance's mission. When you look at 83 to 60 to 63, you begin to see we are changing the course from a systems perspective and turning it around, which is great, but it becomes a compounded growth, which is negative. So you're right. If we're able to say core instruction, quality instruction, getting students to third grade and maintaining that 83, then ultimately that's where we want to go.
Yeah, so this is where the following cohorts of students from starting in kindergarten through first and through second and so on and so forth becomes important, especially when you're differentiating, because you want to be able to see where that growth is, where it began, or where the need was, and then where it moves from grade to grade in the future. I talked with Barbara Hammond. I've talked with you about this plenty of times, and some of your staff members, about staff development for educators, which is a massive platform for differentiated instruction. I was trained in it. They have lots of incredible training opportunities in this particular area. And it took probably about a week-long training from 9 a.m. until 6 p.m. Very intense. And then everyone came back to the school, and then you had trainers who trained other leaders in the school building. It takes a good 3 to 5 years to actually master, and a lot of planning on the part of the teacher, because differentiating, as many may not know, it's not the same as creating a different worksheet for each student. That's not differentiating. It is literally similar to literally creating a lesson plan for each individual student, or for the students who are on the same grade level at least. So it's really, it's not as simple as looking at a curriculum sheet and then saying, well, here's a little guide for the teacher and the teacher's guide. This is how you can address your ELLs in your group, and this is how you can differentiate. I mean, those are good, but that's not truly trained and certified in differentiation. So at what point, because we've talked about this many times, and it would seem to be a really great opportunity partnering with the Learning Alliance in this aspect to get cohorts of teachers specifically trained in differentiation so that they can begin this cohort practice and maintain growth within our current kindergartners moving forward.
So I think you've kind of captured the entire initiative in what we're looking to do. We have been hyper-focused in making sure that the investment in teachers keeps them in the career. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, the conversation for me really started, if I'm having to retrain teachers every single year who don't have a background in teaching and learning, it's ultimately pouring money into someone who walks away from the craft of teaching. We've got to stop the bleeding. And I think when you look at our retention rates in our school system, we really have done a good job this year in keeping teachers. In speaking to two fellow superintendents who are still in their jobs, they have a lot of, they're losing teachers left and right. We don't experience that. So we're happy about that. And then really understanding what differentiation is.
Yep.
And a lot of times we're fighting, we just want to differentiate meaning remediate.
Right.
That's not what we want to do.
Right.
We want to get core instruction. We want to differentiate the core instruction to meet the needs of all learners to get it right the first time, to create different experiences for students in the first exposure. That is a cost-effective way. That is the most powerful way. That increases the elective students will have in secondary experiences. That allows us to pay more money to teachers. The less we have to remediate, the more money we have in a very challenging environment in today's world to get this to provide a more meaningful experience. But it is following students from year to year and having a deep understanding as to we're going to differentiate the core instruction and reduce the need to remediate as best we can. There's no such thing as getting rid of it. That will never happen, but we just can't spend our life and time remediating students. We've got to get the standards-based instruction done in a way that keeps students at the rigor or the expectation of that particular standard.
Yeah. The last thing, if I can go into this as well, I think understanding or reaching out to, and I don't know where we stand on this particular concern, reaching out to the DOE or whomever is involved in this to kind of figure out what feedback, maybe Ms. Besura knows, what feedback we have been given for future planning on receiving the FAST benchmarks detailed analysis that would help teachers, because that's really where those benchmarks were intended to be, was a guide to help teachers pivot in their instruction, right? Either summative assessment or formative assessment. However the teacher is assessing the student in the classroom, using those benchmarks can also help change the course of a lesson plan for a particular student, not a class. And so that's where the different, and I know that we haven't received that. Well, the last I checked, we hadn't received the detail analysis or when teachers would be able to receive that. And I think that's important. So far, I know it's new. I know we're still in the first year stage of it, but
I think
what
just
have you?
as the state goes through its regression study over the course of this year, it'll be able to give us more specific data to help us drive instruction. Any assessment that's not the end-of-year assessment, it's just as much for the teacher as it is for the student. And when it tells the teacher, okay, I need to reassess here or modify my core instruction to make sure more of my students get it right the first time, that information isn't as rich as it has been in previous years because it is the first year. We're getting no opportunity to celebrate the growth of students who are yet to be proficient this year. We're getting no opportunities to celebrate the growth of a student who went from a 3 to a 4 or a 4 to a 5 or grew within a 5. We're just getting one solid score, which is a line drawn in the sand, 3 or above. But as we move into next year, we will get what we call actionable data that we can look back and say, all right, it's these standards which link to this specific lesson, and I can problem solve as a teacher to learn two things: improve core instruction and get the appropriate remediation where it needs to be to the right students. So
But you had a, I'm sorry, you had a screenshot or a slide up there on the benchmarks, right?
Yes, but that's just looking at overall growth, students scoring at 3 or above. It's not looking at, when you're looking at comprehension, this is the growth point. And we just taught comprehension, or we just did a unit on main idea. That's not, we're not getting into the weeds
Right.
that's the information that makes it actionable.
Right, okay, thank you.
Ms. Berenborn?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Thank you very much to the Learning Alliance and all the people that work with Moonshot. We appreciate your help and assistance, and it's been very valuable for several years, and we are committed to that 90% or higher goal. Real-time decision-making is key, and we've heard data-driven assessments and data-driven decision-making for years. But truly, when you're looking at, like I saw on your screen, you had 3 different data points that you were making: iReady, diagnostic, STAR, and the state assessment, correct?
So, yes. But
Which is the state assessment?
Yes.
STAR. Okay, so we're not getting any feedback really from STAR yet because this is their first year, so they're just taking information from us, and they'll give us information back. So on iReady, and we don't know how that's going to align to STAR, right?
We do, the alignment is high, so yes.
We think it's on?
Yes.
Okay. Those decisions on iReady, how often, because I know teachers complain sometimes about too much testing. So how are we able to take that iReady information and turn around and say, let's make this decision now, and really do data-driven decision-making?
Okay, so all of the data that I'm showing public-facing is data that we use over the course of time. So I think in iReady, there's 13 or 14 weeks in between assessments for it to be valid data. The informative instruction that we have in terms of planning is looking at the informal assessments or the quick teacher tests that we take. Mm-hmm. That is how we're driving instruction. Okay. If we're, and I think I mentioned in my presentation, if we're waiting 6 and 7 or 8 weeks to shift or modify instruction, then we're wasting that number of weeks. When teachers plan together, they identify how are we going to assess this lesson linked to this specific standard in order to inform me as the educator, does this student have mastery, or what component do I need to reassess with Tier 2 or Tier 3 instruction to make sure he does in fact have mastery before I move on. And when I say in real time, that's within the confines of the lesson that's been planned.
Right, you're saying stuff that I used to do because I was a classroom teacher K to 5, so I understand.
I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to anyone who's listening.
But when you said, and that's why I brought it up, because not everybody understands how it works, especially in K to 5. With that understanding, you said teacher design tests. So are we doing unit tests still as a district, or are we just doing teacher line tests or chapter tests?
So we do offer those to teachers.
Okay.
We don't use it. It's a resource provided to them if they want to pull it within their common planning team or individually to use that. We do have it available within the pacing guides that we have. We're providing as many resources to them to quickly assess and allow them to understand where kids currently sit.
But we're not using that as an evaluation tool on the teacher?
No.
Okay. I wanted to bring that point up because that has been used in the past, so I wanted to make sure, because I want teachers to be able to use whatever access they have to assess the child's ability at that time to make a decision, turn around quickly. So great. How is this different or similar to a lab school?
So in a lot of ways, it will be similar. It will be a hub of learning for our school system. A lab school is typically connected to a university or college where they're pulling in other practices or other individuals. The theory of action is to create some of that action within our own school system. So really having an accelerated level of support to individuals to bring them to mastery at whatever the instructional strategy or the high yield strategy is, and allow us to learn from that, accelerates the achievement or the attainment of those strategies at all schools.
So in other words, teachers from other schools will be able to come in and observe. Will we be doing videos of instruction techniques?
Absolutely. So you'll see this will, I don't know how to say, it will be the hub. So everything that we're doing, teachers will fully understand. These are my high yield strategies in which I am credentialed, meaning I have, hit the highest level. I'm an observable teacher in differentiation or whatever the strategy would be. It's being very intentional about just not thinking about what's really good, but documenting who has it, and then creating and using that acceleration team really to ensure the principal can continue to be the principal, and the acceleration team works with Ms. Garcia and her team to bring folks from the outside in, either to observe, or in some cases go out and say, let me help you with this help you bring this to life at your school.
Great, yeah, I remember as a principal bringing a kind of a younger teacher in to watch an experienced teacher that was really good at, questioning students and really getting the whole class involved. And I remember bringing that teacher in and saying, okay, let's go and observe. And then we watched for 10 minutes. We came out and I said, what did you notice? And the answer was, oh, I really liked her bulletin boards. Well, you got to go in and really go in with that focus and that directive instruction focus.
Yep.
And more that we gear in on exactly what we're looking at when we're going in and looking at those instructions. That's why those videos started. This was in St. Lucie where I worked, but we did those video instructions, and I thought that's what's great, because the teacher saw the video and then they went in and observed it in the classroom, so they could really put those two together and get the best bang for your buck. So I appreciate the fact that we're going to do that. One thing I noticed on slides 6 and 7, you had, it says growing educators at the top. Chris, if you have it.
That would be me.
Oh, that's you. Okay. Thank you. So go up one more. Is that one more? Yeah. So notice that Glendale has only 2 full coaching cycles, where all the rest had so many. Why is that?
So they're agreed upon before they're actually done. So you're looking at what exactly that would be. A full coaching cycle would be from full-on creating a lesson, implementing the lesson, debriefing the lesson. So it just depends on what the actual need of the specific teacher is. So it's not anything that could be negative. I'd have to drill it and say maybe there's not a need for a full coaching cycle based on the teachers that are there, but they're mutually agreed upon in terms of what the strategy or what the type of support would be prior to implementing.
Okay, so that would be the same in the second slide then for Citrus, Glendale, and Sebastian.
Correct.
Okay, so is that because they have more seasoned teachers?
It would be more seasoned teachers, or just specifically the design in which the coach may be working through. They could be working through and saying, all right, this week we're going to focus in on just, transitions, and that would be under the teacher assistance or mini coaching cycle. Now that we've got transitions, now we're going to go back and we're going to do whole group. So it's a design that we want to give the school sites the autonomy with our support to understand what is the best way to support their teachers at their school site.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
You made a comment, and it was building world-class educators. That should be written everywhere when we go to do this and present it to the community and put it out there. That's what we're doing. Because if you build a world-class teacher, you're going to get world-class students, because they're going to learn from those world-class teachers. So I appreciate that term. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Berenborg.
Let me just make one.
I'm sorry, go
comment.
ahead.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to thank the Learning Alliance. Your efforts are definitely appreciated by us all, and I know we're all optimistic and hoping we can achieve these goals. So thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore.
All right, thank you, Learning Alliance. I appreciate it. If you want to get out, now's the time.
Thank you, Learning Alliance and Moonshot. Thank you very much.
Our next two items, as a matter of fact, will be presented by our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Fagan.
Good afternoon, board members. 2 quick items. We have interior painting going on at Oslo. Total price is about $72,000. There was 4 responding bidders. The lowest one won based on lowest price and most responsive. We'll be painting that over this summer. Second item is also exterior painting at Storm Grove. Price is about $165,000. Same scenario, 4 responders, lowest and best price won. That work is scheduled over summertime as well. Any questions?
Board members, any questions?
No.
Mr. Fagan, I just saw on the interior, it said starting April 24th. That was on the date?
That's when the contract starts, but that's kind of like pre-planning work. when
Okay,
they can get
got
in.
it. I
Yes.
didn't want them painting during school. Thank you very much. Anything else on those 2 items, board members? Okay, Dr. Moore, next.
Through the chair, good afternoon, board members. Hold the presentation up here. So as discussed in individual board briefings over the past month, the Office of Curriculum and Instruction engaged in an instructional materials adoption for a probability and statistics book. Let me move on here. The textbook is titled Statistics and Probability with Applications. It's the 4th edition. The publishers are Bedford, Freeman, and Worth Publishing Group. This is a book that is on the state's approved materials list. It is actually the only probability and statistics honors book that's on their list. This book was not reviewed by our math committee last year when we went through the adoption process because we did not teach this particular course code at the time, but we would like to add this course code for our students moving forward. It does have a great rating from the state. The Florida Department of Education received it. It has a subject-specific rating of a 4.6 out of 5 and a percentage of alignment at a 93.4%. So we used several methods to attract committee members. We sent out a phone call. We posted on our district website. A personal email was sent to all of the previous math committee members from last year. Also to superintendents, the board members, cabinet members, and our school administrators. So during our first committee meeting, we actually went through and our attorney conducted sunshine training for the committee meeting members. We facilitated the Florida Department of Education library training. The publisher went through a presentation process, and then we reviewed the adoption timeline, the standards associated with this course, and the rubric. We went through committee meeting 2. During that committee meeting, we elected a chair. There was an opportunity for Q&A. We discussed the rubric, the scoring, and the committee members voted. At that point, the required 20-day public review of the recommended textbook took place from March 15th to April 4th. So out of the six out of the 6 committee members did recommend this textbook, and membership classification was 1 classroom teacher, 1 parent, 1 school-based administrator, an instructional math coach, and 2 residents. So, and I would just like to thank the committee members who provided their time and their commitment to this process. It's always a big time commitment, and so we just appreciate those folks who stepped up to serve on this committee for us. Any questions?
Board members?
Yeah, how many parents on the committee?
There was 1 parent and 2 residents.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see that there. So how is that, you said 1 parent and 2 what?
Residents.
Oh, residents. So, okay, 2 citizens who don't have children.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct.
What was the other textbook that did they only look at 1 text? This
There
was
is
from the
only
DOE.
one
Right.
approved book on the Department of Education's
Gotcha.
list for this particular course code. So we only reviewed the 1 book.
Anyone else?
No.
Ms. Barenboim? Thank you, Ms. Becerra.
Thank you. I don't know who needs that.
Thank you. Next item is item E, and it's presented by Ms. Dampier.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, through the chair. Each cabinet member has had opportunity to review volume 23, number 2 policies and answer any questions during board briefings. This item is an agenda item on the business meeting on April 24th to request approval of the public hearing. But at this time, we bring forward these policies. If you have any questions, we'd be more than willing to answer those questions.
Dr. Pasca, Ms. Barenboim?
Yeah, I asked all my questions.
Ms. Rosario?
I do. I have a couple that I hadn't had a chance to talk with you about previously. I'd like to take a look at policy, or what is recommended as policy 8800 and 8810. I'll give board members a chance to get there. So that's 8800 and 8810.
Anybody have a page number?
There's no page number, it's section,
On
it's,
the slides, there is a page number.
I got the book. I'm looking in the book.
Religious and other ceremonies.
Got to be way down, like
Religious,
in the
religious
hundreds,
and
maybe.
other ceremonies.
I'll tell you the
It's up on the
section.
CNI.
It's in curriculum and instruction.
36?
Yes, page 36.
I see it. Okay.
So let me get my notes here. All right, so what was provided in terms of an explanation by Neola for these two policies is that these two policies, and this is where we have to be pretty diligent with Neola and taking a look at what they're recommending. So these two policies are not a result of any changes in law. They are just recommending some reorganization so that it makes sense in the religious and others policy. If you notice, there was something with regard to flags that was just removed and put in the other flag policy. That kind of makes sense. That's fine. All of that is, their recommendation for the reorganization seems fine, with the exception of, and what I realized later, is that there was an inclusion of a sentence that has nothing to do with reorganization. They added in on that policy the first full green line. It says district staff members shall not use prayer, religious readings, or religious symbols as a devotional exercise or in an act of worship or celebration. That has nothing to do with reorganization. They've just inserted that, and it has nothing to do with law. So we don't need it. My recommendation is to take it out. I have a very, I think my antennas go up when a legal organization wants to insert anything with regard to religion that has nothing to do with a change in statute. So I will also tell you that for those who are going to be concerned about it, we already have a policy on religion in the curriculum. And that is 2270, based on the First Amendment protection for the establishment of religion in schools. And it says it very clearly there, no devotion exercises or displays of religious character will be permitted, and so on. And so it's captured. We already have it in current policy. We don't need it here. We also have, and there's more in that policy, we also have, pull that up again, the other place. We also have statute 1002.206, which is entitled Religious Expression in Public Schools. Within that statute, it very clearly states all of the rights of a student with regard to religion, but this is addressing district staff. And I will say that it says that a school district shall comply with the federal regulations in Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits an employer from discriminating against an employee on the basis of religion. So I just want to rather be cautious than cross any lines. This seems to contradict current statute and policies that we already have. It actually is redundant, right? It's repeating the same thing that's captured in a previous, and it has nothing to do with a change in current legislation. Yeah. So that's my, just remove that sentence.
Just a question then, Dr. Moore, Ms. Dampier, why was it put in there? I mean, I'm not saying I agree here, but why was that put in there?
So, through the chair, maybe if Molly, you have an answer to that? Otherwise,
It's just Neola. Neola put it
I
in.
mean, I know it's Neola. Why they do it, I can't speak for them, but we could definitely reach out to them, gain a deeper, at least an understanding as to why the recommendation is being made, and provide that information to the board. Unless, I think this policy belongs to Ms. Besser. Do you have anything in addition to that? You have any, Molly?
No, I don't have anything in addition to that. I don't know. All I know is what was written on the, I'm trying to think of the word, the summary that they give for the changes, which did say it did not speak to making substantive changes like that. It spoke more to the
organization.
the flag and the
Yeah.
organization. So I'm not sure why that change was made. Thanks.
Anyone else? Dr. Pasca? Ms. Beer?
No, I mean, it is concerning that if this is already in another policy, I don't know that it needs to be reiterated here. So maybe it'd be good to hear back from Neola, I guess, what was the rationale behind changing that? I don't know if it's something we can contact them and ask.
Ms. Berenborg?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I'm looking at it thinking, well, maybe they left out that a staff member shouldn't direct students in that, but
Right.
I don't know why they had it, so that would be a good question.
In my opinion, is I don't want to change anything without checking with Neola to make sure that we're okay. Yeah, the policy is what we do, so we've got to be careful.
I'd just like to thank you for your support in this. I'd just like to add that it says already here that if it has nothing to do with law, then it's up to the board to make the final decision. So it's not, we're not held to any statutory requirements with regard to these two policies. Dr. Moore, I think you wanted to say something.
Did you reference both of your policies that you had concerns with, or is it
I referenced
just the one, I thought?
just the one, but I referenced the other one because I talked about the flag being moved from one to the other.
Okay.
Both of those, though, in the summary do say that both of those are not a result of changes to law.
All right.
So, and it happens. Neola oftentimes makes recommendations.
So what I will do through the
Yeah.
chair is reach out to Neola, gain a deeper understanding, provide the board with the rationale for the recommended change. There has to be something. Provide that information to the board. That's why we do this 2 weeks prior to approval.
Thank you. Ms. Rosario, did you have another one, or you're okay?
I think I'm okay. Thank you.
Dr. Posca or Ms. Berenborg? I have a couple questions. This was on the board orientation. Received an email from Ms. Dampier about board orientation and making some changes. Can you go through that a little bit for me?
Sorry about that. Yes, that was, ooh, you're a fan there. No, that was.
Scared me.
Policy 142.3, during our board briefings, of course, we take recommendations from board members to add or remove language or accept or deny. And we were asked to, for this particular policy, to add a sentence in reference to upon election, whether unopposed by filing date, primary or general election, each new board member elect shall be contacted by the board attorney to review the sunshine laws. And Ms. Rosario asked that we add that, since we were adding everything else as far as procedures, but I'll let her go ahead, and Ms. Rosario, go ahead and proceed with that.
Yeah, no problem. So we've talked about this before, probably just in passing, and this seems to be a good opportunity to add it to the policy. What has I mean, for those of you who were here, I think everybody was here with Suzanne when she was our attorney, with the exception of Mr. Posca, Dr. Posca. The previous attorney would contact all board member elects, whether unopposed at the date of filing or the deadline for filing and qualifying, or whether upon election in the primary or upon election in the general election. And she would, you know, basically say, congratulations, you are now board member elect, and you are now subject to the sunshine. And it was just good practice to do that when Dr. Posca was unopposed in May, I believe it was. He became board member elect. I contacted Molly Shattuck, Ms. Shattuck, and I just kind of asked her, because I know Mrs. Shattuck had only been here with us for a little bit of time, and just to kind of see if she would reach out. She was planning to reach out to Dr. Posca and just give him the FYI, congratulations, you are now subject to sunshine. Obviously, it was just a way of looking out for and protecting Dr. Posca as a new board member-elect. Clearly, there's so much time from May until November where, you know, we certainly wouldn't want him to get in a pickle and violate that, or anybody really for that matter, not just him. And so we had that conversation, and Ms. Shattuck was unaware that, at least she expressed to me that she was unaware that she needed to reach out to him. I don't know if she did ultimately or not, but I think this would be a good opportunity for us to put it in here. What I've got for you to also add to this conversation is, since this, I'm going to say, we can let Ms. Shattuck talk, I'm going to say she does agree, she thinks it's a good idea to add it in, because we did talk about this prior. But I will say that part of the law, there's in the Sunshine Law, there's a place in the Sunshine Law, and I have it here to quote, that says that if you are a member-elect, you would be a member-elect upon election day. But if you are unopposed, there is no election day, right? So Dr. Posca, for example, I keep mentioning you because you're here, Dr. Posca was not on a ballot in the primary. He was not on the ballot in a general election. So there was no election day for him. He was unopposed in May, not any other time, which means he's done. He's it. He's board member-elect. The Sunshine Law states that members elect to such boards are subject to the Sunshine Law, even though they have not yet taken office. There is a section on members elect in here that also says the same thing. The requirements for the Sunshine Law apply not only to meetings of covered boards or commissions, but also to meetings with or attended by any person elected to the school board or commission, but who have not taken office. And obviously, there's some other support behind that. So I just wanted to cover all bases, not just for us, but for future board members to be able to say, if you were unopposed, you still get that phone call that says, you know, congratulations, but please be careful.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Barefoot, welcome. Does he see us? I just want to say hi.
Thank you. Nice to be with you. A little late, but
Thank you.
better than.
Ms. Shattuck, would you like to respond to that before I talk about Mike?
Yes, I have no issues with this language being added. I think it's a good addition. And yes, that is how I found out about the practice that you already had here, and so I think it makes sense to put it into policy. Thanks.
So what date is it, just for me specifically, that someone like Dr. Posca, who would maybe be unopposed, would that information have to go to him?
Thank you, Chairwoman. So that would be upon election, so that could depend on when the election's held. So before election, the person, even if they're a candidate, would not, even if they're unopposed candidate, would not necessarily be considered held to the sunshine, but upon the election date, they would be.
So if this was a primary election, it would be on that date?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Berenborg?
Yeah, I was chair at the time, and I did reach out, I believe, to Dr. Moore. I asked Ms. Esplin about it, and I also reached out to FSBA because I knew you were unopposed. And I asked at what point does he need to know about sunshine and be informed of that? Is it upon certification, which is in July, I believe, June or July, or is it upon election? And that was a really good question because there were two different feelings about that because, again, you were unopposed, and so just to be cautious about it, when exactly should that happen? So I think we need further clarification on that because I do know it says upon election, and that's what FSBA thought as well. But I wanted to make sure that he understood about that as soon as possible, and I couldn't reach out to tell him. So, board members should not be doing that with elected or new, I guess, certified new board members because you weren't elected yet. So that is the question, but I think putting it into the policy is a really good thing. It also should be in our manual for when new people are coming on board, because I do know, I remember Dr. Schiff won in her primary, And I had to go to November, my first time in an election. I believe you did too, Ms. Rosario. And she was told about Sunshine much earlier than we were because she was a board member as of August, and we weren't until November. So I think it's just a good practice. For some reason, I don't understand why we don't do this with the supervisor of elections, is letting them know, hey, why don't you give all candidates this information so that they understand and they know that the day that you have been elected or you're certified or whichever it is, that you are now under Sunshine. Because I didn't know that until I got the call. And so I think it would be nice to know that before you get that call.
So, yes, being in policy is fine, but I don't know if I'm still clear. When would this person be notified that they cannot violate Sunshine?
Yes, Chairwoman. So when you look in the Sunshine Manual, and there's also some Attorney General opinions on it, it says that it's not just when someone's running unopposed that they become beholden to Sunshine, that it's upon the election date. I suppose that the reasoning would be that before the election date, you know, they could drop out and they're not considered elected. Although I'm not entirely sure because they didn't really explain their reasoning behind that. And then the election date can be considered differently depending on the circumstances. You know, this wouldn't just apply to school boards, it applies to others as well. So, but for the most part, it would just be upon the election date. And that's how it's worded in the policy. Does that make sense? But the election date could be different, depending on, you know.
It would probably be August if you were
Yeah.
unopposed.
Right.
Okay.
Ms. Rosario?
But I think what Dr. Jones is asking is, okay, so today you are notified that you are unopposed. When does the attorney contact that person who is elect? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because I've getting mixed answers.
So this is written where it doesn't say exactly when the attorney will contact the member-elect, but we can add that in there if you're more comfortable with that. This just says that upon election, whether unopposed by filing date. So whatever that filing, if you're unopposed by filing date, May 1st is the filing date. If you're unopposed by May 1st, maybe within 1 or 2 days from that date, it would be appropriate to expect the attorney to reach out to that member-elect. I know when I won both, well, the first time around, the general election, literally it had to be like within 24 to 48 hours, I was contacted by Suzanne. I mean, she was quick. She gave me a phone call, congratulations.
It was the next morning for me.
It was
Yeah.
the next morning for
Yeah.
you? Like, it was fast. She was on it, she was paying attention to the elections. In this case, if we can add in there within 24 hours or 24 to 48 hours, it is expected that the attorney contact the member-elect in all circumstances. We can add that, I'm certainly fine with that. But I'm not sure, but I think that might have answered your question.
Ms. Berenborg?
Can I ask, since we're discussing this, is it possible for us to reach out maybe to Supervisor of Elections Office and see if
That might
there's
be
something
good.
that we can give them?
I did.
Okay, to see if they could give that to candidates so that the candidate knows that to expect that it's coming, because I didn't know about it.
I
till it
did, but I
happened.
was kind of told that that's,
That's our job.
yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Shaddick, and I just think, I mean, this is good discussion, good conversation. Maybe you can check too, what would be the most appropriate, whether we put that in there, certain timeline or something like that. But I do remember my call was, I think it was the day after.
Yeah.
And I just knew that just from past practice for some friends who had run for election, but it's good to know. It's good to know. And whether you think we should put a timeline in there, maybe you can make a recommendation and then, let us know. But I think a timeline might be good, especially if people are running unopposed, so they know, you know what I mean? All righty. I have a couple concerns. I'm sorry, that was the one, and the other one I have basically was the travel and expenses. Significant rise of school board members and school district employees attending virtual trainings and conferences. So,
What policy is this?
I'm sorry, 0147.1, travel and expenses. So, Mr. Fagan, one of this was in there, it was about virtual training. I guess I'm asking for school board and so forth. I mean, what I know is that basically we can go to one conference, the one in December. And if we want to ask for more, how does that work into the budget, and do we have to add to that? I'm not asking for more, please don't get me wrong, but I just want to make sure, and the public knows, we're not out there traveling and going to a lot of conferences. And we want to keep our budget to the point where if it can be virtual, maybe that would be good in some circumstances. And I know it's also for teachers. So what was the concern there?
You have to back up for me, in the policy where we amended it to allow for virtual training?
Yeah, that's one. Are we amending it because of budget and people are doing more virtual or save money? And then it even looks at school board expenses, school board member expenses going up.
Okay.
So what are we trying to accomplish here?
Through the chair, probably threefold. One, it was a recommendation by Neola. Number two, we're doing more of it. So just to cover ourselves in the policy, we're going to make
Got
sure
it.
the policy states that you can cover virtual training. Three, it's for anybody and everybody who wants to do any virtual training. So if the board wants to do more training virtually, we'll just move some funds around within the budget to cover that.
Okay. I mean, just as a school board member, I understand that going to the FSBA conference in November, December is crucial. But I thought if I wanted to go to another one, I just want to make sure that people don't think we're just spending money out the, yeah, I mean, there might be one I want to go to and I would personally pay for it, but in our budgets, and maybe Ms. Esplin can help me here too, I know we approved so much money for the year, but with the costs going up, are we going to be okay as we go into next year?
Through the chair, yes, ma'am. And as a comparison, the amount of money this board spends compared to probably some other boards is significantly less.
That's good to know. Thank you very much. Ms. Rosario?
I'd like to just bring your attention to this change in 0147.1 that you're talking about doesn't seem to also be changed because of a law. This just seems to be language that Neola has opted to offer for the change in our current policy. And I think that's important because if it was tied to law, then we would have no choice but to keep that in there. But it makes sense to just be able to say, if you want to attend a training, why not attend it virtually? I mean, if you can, why not, right? We actually increase our opportunity that our teachers would become, better qualified or, whatever they may need for professional development credits.
And through the chair, also to make it more convenient for the individual if they can
Right.
attend virtually without having to travel, leave the family, makes it easier for everybody.
And I just wanted to, ensure our taxpayers, we're not out there spending money to spend money. And virtual training will help on our savings also.
Through the chair, yes, ma'am, because now you don't have travel expense and hotels.
Correct. Thank you. Anyone else on any of these policies? Okay. Okay, the next one, Dr. Moore, Sebastian River High School
The
Media.
next three items be presented by Mr. Bass.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Board. Through the chair, I have a couple items for you. The first one is the approval of Tarquette flooring, which will be supplying the district the flooring for the Sebastian River High School Media Center renovation. It comes at a cost of $137,000, and it is budgeted within the capital budget. Second item I've got is really excited about this is emergency management mitigation grant, which is a reimbursement grant, and a collection of staff members worked on this. Mr. Teskey, Mr. Seymour, Mr. Michael, Mr. Westenberger, and probably missing some people, but an opportunity came for us to apply to get some additional and up-to-date hardening structures for Treasure Coast Elementary, which serves as a special needs shelter for hurricanes. This grant reimbursement is for $577,000. Really consists of four components. Large missile impact-resistant shutters, impact glass where we don't already have impact glass, door replacement and hardware replacement, and the anchors for roof vents. We already have anchors there, but this is a stronger anchor. So In order for us to move forward with this, we'd have to get board approval, which would come to you in later this month. And then once that occurs, we can go out and start the procurement process to get the vendor who is going to supply this for us. So really excited about that, and just would like to thank those individuals who worked on that again for their hard work. And that was in conjunction with Indian River County Emergency Management and Ryan and his team over there also. And then the last item I've got is the instructional and non-instructional work calendars for 23-24. We bring these to you every year so that we can provide those out to the employees. Also has payroll information on those. There are 3 small little tweaks that need to be done, and I'm going to defer to Mr. Fagan to bring those about to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bass. To the chair, through the board. Yes, there was just some clarification, very benign changes. And the 244-day calendar for June 19th, we need to mark it as yellow to signify it as a holiday. So it'd make it easier for anyone to check their holidays. For the 250, we needed to make January 3rd a non-paid workday. March 27th needed to be changed to a non-work, non-pay day. And June 19th as a holiday for Juneteenth needed to be yellow as well. It's also to make sure all the calendars are basically consistent, holidays are the same, and also to keep them within their number of days. The 250 within 250. Next one was the 220-day non-instructional. We need to make a slight change to make November 24th a holiday, paid holiday. May had to change the coloring. Everything stays the same. Everybody gets the same amount of pay. It's just making some clerical corrections.
Thank you. Board members, any questions, comments?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes the superintendent items. The remainder of the agenda are board member items, so I'll turn it back over to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the first one on board protocols, and I know we don't need another workshop on reviewing those, but just a couple things as a chair, if you could help me out with. Number one, especially during board meetings, I know that we're a little bit more informal in workshops, but please wait to be recognized only so I don't call on one person before the other one has his hand up or her hand up. And the last one I wanted to remind people of, it is in protocol that when we move consent items to action items, and that's the will of the board, no problem. Once that is out there, that is our meetings to change. We should notify the superintendent and the chair just so that we have the information we need. I think last board meeting, 3 consent items were moved to action, and it says that we should notify the chair and the superintendent. And that's just for, I know we all don't want to do a catch-22. We want to make sure that Dr. Moore is prepared, that the district person who maybe needs to respond is prepared. So I just ask for your cooperation on that because that is part of our protocols. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying, but protocols are not policy, nor are they statute. We have responsibilities and the authority of the board on 2 of our current policies. Policy 0121 and policy 0122 states that it is our responsibility to be the organizational body having full control over the public schools within our district. With that board power, as described in policy 0122, and as prescribed by law, the general powers of the board are the determination of educational policies, the adoption of such rules and regulations to supplement those prescribed by the state bond, the Commissioner of Education, as will contribute to a more orderly and efficient operation of the schools. That said, the board shall perform all duties found in the Florida statutes. With that, our responsibilities are to be the policy-making body of the school district. Now, there is no limit on, and supported in Robert's Rules of Order, that the board can remove things from consent to action. At any time within a board meeting, board members have the opportunity to make a motion on any item at any particular time and move it to action. A board meeting the board agenda essentially belongs to the superintendent in consultation with the board chair prior to the meeting. When the gavel is hit, the agenda then belongs to the board members. which is why at any given point in time, at that point during the items of consent, we as a board body can move items from consent to action. There is no limit on that. That is supported in our policies, that is supported by legislation. We have a we have a statute 1001.41 that states exactly the board may determine policies. No policy can be in conflict, obviously, with any other law of the state or educational rules. We also have, let me get my notes, in our protocols, even though protocols is not policy, I will say that in our protocols, we have this written in there: board members may add items to the board meeting agenda for action or discussion through the superintendent 8 days prior to the meeting, along with the backup items. And once a duly convened meeting is called to order, the agenda then belongs to the school board members, who then have the authority to amend the agenda. If you go into Robert's Rules of Order, amending the agenda is exactly that, taking items from consent and moving them to action or to discussion, depending on whatever the will of the board member might be. It goes on to say that during the adoption of the orders of the day, board members may add items that need to be brought forward. Board members should make every effort not to add items to an action agenda once a meeting has been called to order. But that should is not a mandate. So it's recommended, obviously, if we want to add something to an action item, that we would, if we know ahead of time, that we would bring it before the board. But there are circumstances where you're not sure, or time limits, or an emergency, or something happens where you don't have the opportunity to do that. According to Robert's Rules of Order, 3.21 to 323, with regard to motions, business is brought before the assembly, and the board members are the assembly, by the motion of a member. A motion is a formal proposal by a member in a meeting that the assembly take certain action on. The proposed action may be of a substantive nature, or it may express a certain view or direct that a particular investigation be conducted. As you well know, it could be any particular thing. Essentially, that's just the main motion. Before a member in the assembly or before a board member can make a motion or speak in a debate, the parliamentary name given to any form of discussion, he or she must obtain the floor. It is good practice, I agree, to prepare your colleagues in advance, of course. If you don't, then you risk not having full support. On the other hand, if a member chooses to add an item, an action item, by way of motion at any time during a business meeting, then he or she takes the chance of that action dying for lack of support, clearly. But that would be the will of the individual board member. 4.2 in Robert's Rules explains how motions are brought, right? A member can make a motion, any member seconds the motion, the chair states the question. Once the chair states the question, the motion is open for debate. Debate happens, members vote, and then, of course, the motion actually, it either passes or it dies. Since 2020, I have seen an immense amount of stifling or limiting our work. We went from a board that met 2 times a month to one that now meets 1 time a month. I'm not sure if you all feel the burn of that, but I certainly see a significant burden on our work when we do meet. We went from having healthy, full discussions at meetings to having limits put on how board members should speak and how much time on an action item. We went from having both a superintendent workshop and a board discussion session to now removing the board discussion sessions altogether and tacking on our are discussion items at the end of a superintendent workshop. And the problem with that is that we might not always have time. Obviously, we've had crunch time where we haven't been able to discuss certain items because we were over our 4-hour limit. We went from agreeing that board protocols would be expectations for work to creating do's and don'ts and assuming that protocols were policy. We hardly see items on action. We now see a lot of our action items that should be action items in the consent items. And that's why things are moved from consent to action, because the items in consent should really be for ministerial purposes only, or routine things only. Things that you see on a regular basis should be in consent. Everything else should be in action where we are voting on it. So if there are things that a board member notices that should not be in consent, you have the right to move it to action. That is your right as a board member. If there are any divisions on the board, I would even, liken it to say that differences of opinion really shouldn't have anything to do with that, but limiting how much time we speak with each other has a lot to do with having divisions on a board. So my point is that there are enough limits. Regarding adding items to the agenda, coming to a close, the Sunshine Law does not mandate, and I'm going to read it directly, the Sunshine Law does not mandate that an agency provide notice of each item on an agenda to be discussed. It only limits that an agenda be posted, but it doesn't mandate that every item that you discuss be on an agenda. The courts have rejected such a requirement because it could effectively preclude access to meetings by members. But again, it also mentions that it's in good practice to prepare in advance so you're not catching board members, obviously, or the citizens off guard with a last-minute item. Thus, the Sunshine Law does not require board members to consider only those items on a published agenda, which means that you can certainly have the right to add an item if you so choose when the gavel is hit and when a board meeting begins. Even though the Sunshine Law does not prohibit a board member from adding topics to the agenda, the Attorney General has advised, and I agree, obviously, to postpone formal action of items that are controversial. But other than that, that's it. So while the Sunshine Law requires notice of meetings, not of individual items, which may be considered at the meeting, other statutes and codes would impose such a requirement. In this particular case, what is being asked, there is no such requirement.
Ms. Berenborg?
Sure. I didn't take your comment as you're stifling our speech. I felt like what I did last meeting, actually, was come to you as a courtesy as a board chair, because I know, having been board chair, at the beginning of the meeting, you're given all of the requests to speak, and you're giving all this other stuff. So as a courtesy, I said, I am going to pull an item, and I'm going to move it. And that's all I told you, because we can't discuss the item until we're on the dais. So I did that out of courtesy to let you know that that was coming, because I had gone back to our FSBA training, where on master board training, they tell you out of courtesy and respect to your chair, you should just give them a heads up that you're going to somehow change the agenda so they're prepared for it. You don't have to give them all the details, but as you're right, Ms. Rosario, we have the right to change the agenda how we want. I just think sometimes it's good to kind of give the chair a heads up. Hey, I am going to move something so you know. And I gave a heads up to the superintendent as well. He knew, so that he wasn't caught off guard and had to scramble. And because I have been on the dais when a former superintendent was caught off guard and had to stop a meeting to go get some information for a board member that demanded it on the dais. So I think just out of respect to the superintendent and to the chair to run the smooth meeting, yeah, we have the right to bring anything forward and discuss anything we want, move anything we want. Just as a courtesy, I'm going to tell him, hey, I'm going to move 14A, and I'm going to tell her, hey, I'm going to move 14A. And I'm not going to say why. I might say why to him, but I'm not going to say why to her.
Dr. Posca?
I don't think I have anything to add, but I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, the policy, everything that Ms. Rosario just reviewed, I understand, have always understood. I know that policy is our number one focus, if you will. And when we went through these board protocols, again, I know they're not law, I know they're not policy, I know they're not any kind of restriction, if you will, but it just says, should let the superintendent and chairperson know. I remember my first meeting, I pulled a couple items, and I thought about that later and talked to Dr. Moore. What I'm just saying is, if we do that, I think it's professional courtesy to let the superintendent and chair know. Doesn't mean anything is going to change. Maybe the superintendent needs to get more information. Maybe most of those obviously have gone through our workshop or our daily briefings, but I understand the public needs to know. But maybe he needs to get more information. Maybe the district person needs more information. I'm not saying that we can't do it. I'm just saying it says professional courtesy. And when we did these protocol sessions with Dr. Jacobs, and we worked hard on these, it was just something that we all agreed to consensus. Not trying to hide anything, not trying to say to the public, we don't want to discuss that because the board absolutely has the right. Now, action items being added, that's for good cause, and those are things that I think that are important if it's an emergency type of situation, and we have to get going on it now. But it was just for courtesy, and that's just something I wanted to remind people of. You know, whether you choose to do that or not, that's certainly up to you, but I don't think we have time to try to say, okay, well, I didn't know this was going to be pulled. I need more information. I just want to make sure the superintendent and his district staff has the time to get the information they need in case something else is requested. That was the only reason I said that and brought that up. And I think that was the one main reason that the board members who worked on this last year with Dr. Jacobs said, okay, we can put that in there. That's a consensus. Whether we are going to abide by it or not, that's up to each board member.
Can I add, in December, I know that, and I've said it multiple times, I requested a special meeting for us to discuss and to review board protocols since the election, and since Dr. Posca was not on the board when these protocols were created. That has yet to be done. It's time for us to take a look at some of these protocols again. What do you all think? Because there's some things that need to be changed.
Well, we could certainly do that for Dr. Posca, but I'm not saying we need to do any major changes. A lot of work went into that. And if there was consensus 2 years, or was it last year, I think? That we finally finished it. I don't know what needs to be changed at this point.
Well, we'd have to have a discussion about it for you to see what would need to be changed. But this isn't the time to discuss that. So
Right. Yeah, it's my feeling.
we need to have a time to review the board protocols. So do we do it at a next board meeting? We could do it at a next board meeting, or we can do it at a next workshop, or set a separate discussion session.
Board
Madam
members,
Chair.
I'm sorry, Mr. Barefoot, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Can I make a suggestion? This is all well and good. If somebody has a suggestion on how the protocol should be amended or changed, then
Bring it
write
forward.
it and
Yeah.
have the superintendent circulate it amongst all of us so we are prepared ahead of time to either agree, disagree, or edit, or whatever the case may be. But we don't need to start from ground zero. Just if you have a suggestion
Yeah.
on how they should be changed or edited, feel free to present those so that we get that information. We don't spend 45 minutes or an hour going around and around, which we just did.
No, I think that's a great idea. There was no intention of starting from ground zero, but certainly I know that there are some items that I'd like to present to change, so I'll certainly do that. Didn't know if board members would prefer to have one session together or not, but that works.
That's good, Mr. Barefoot. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
I was just going to say, I think it'd be less time consuming if we did it that way.
I agree. All right, I have the next one, Dr. Moore. This is the new policy, safe, respectful, and inclusive education. Okay. I just want to go on the record saying that I believe the racial equity policy, the one voted in 5-0 in February of 2020 by the previous board, was unanimous, was written well, and had I been on board at that time, I too would have supported it. So far, I just want information out there that I've worked with one district staff member. That was a concern, that we're taking a lot of time from a district staff member. And Dr. Shafty and I looked at it, it might have been 3 or 4 hours. When we looked at this at the very, very beginning, this is when it started on March 6th. I gave that information out. We had it 1 week before our March 13th workshop. And then at the March 13th workshop, it was a 4-1 consensus to allow me to continue to work on this. I want to thank you and listen to your commitment, listen to your comments, and I'm now bringing it back to you. I understand that, board members writing policy, and I've been a part of this one in the achievement gap. I understand that that's something that, board members can look at, just like the racial equity policy. But I feel very strongly about if the racial equity policy is repealed, that we have something in its place. So what I did is I brought it all together instead of many policies in different places. That was a couple comments that were made. Bring it all together, as the previous board did with racial equity. Take out certain words and terms because of state statute. I did look at the achievement gap policy, but I really didn't want to touch that because that was a lot of work. That is going to be there whenever we achieve unitary status for the DSAG order. And it's a supermajority vote to either edit or remove that. So I really didn't want to go in that direction. That policy took a lot of work, and it's imperative that we have that once we reach unitary status. And one of the main, the main focus of that is that once we have unitary status someday, we didn't want it sitting on a shelf like many do now. In fact, some have been challenged again because they were not living up to the expectations. Working hard so that doesn't happen in any River County. So listen to your comments. You had time to review, and simply asking that we place this on the April 24th agenda to be posted for policy review. But I will bring this up later in board discussion. My real goal, I think, would be if the racial equity policy and this new policy put on the same agenda. So if that other one is repealed, we have a replacement. And that's something, too, that's been out there in the press. The racial equity policy has not been repealed. It's up for public review. If you take a look at your policy, and I'm sure you have, it's basically everything in this first page deals with the federal law dealing with state ESSA. It is something that talks about all the subgroups. ESSA is Every Student Succeed Act. And then, of course, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. This is the main focus of that first page. Then we go into eliminating achievement gap, and that's also in our ESSA plan. And then we go into inclusion and educational access, supporting community engagement, which has been a real focus with Dr. Moore in our strategic plan. At the very end, it talks about leadership, teacher, and learning. And I think the teacher and learning part is very, very important. Ensuring lesson design that includes rigorous, relevant, and engaging curriculum to support and accommodate the diverse needs of all students. Embracing collaborative approaches, empowering teachers and administrators to enhance opportunities for students to become active participants in their own learning, and gives all students equal opportunity to succeed while building intentional supports to build student engagement, understanding, and achievement, especially for our most academically vulnerable students. You can see the achievement gap policy that was approved by the board deals with the DSAG order, and that's talking about African American students. We realize that, and that is particular to that order. Now, when you take a look at all of this that I just talked about, this is for all of the subgroups with ethnic groups, race, children with disabilities, economically disadvantaged, English language learners. And then it talks about the subgroups with the 25%, the lower quartile. So I know you could probably look and find some of these in different parts, just like the racial equity policy. But this is bringing it together to show to our community that we are unified as a school district and we are unified in our partnership with all of our parents and students. I guess before ending, I just think about, how did this all come about with the racial equity policy and the letter from the state, and then our response to Jacob Oliva at that time. And we made some corrections. We never heard back, but really wanted to look at something that we could be inclusive with all of our students and all of our, from every area. Right now we are basically a majority minority district, 51%. I'm proud of that diversity. I'm proud to work in this school system. And I think if that racial equity policy is repealed, that we as board members really need to show that we are here for every single student. As we all know, the world is pretty divided right now. And I just want to bring this together as a community, together with all of our students and parents, and just show everyone what our commitment is. So that's my information on that, and I'll start with any board member comments. Dr. Posca? Just looking at it.
Want me to start? Okay.
Sorry, I don't have my glasses on.
Yeah, so I mean, the initial concerns I had about the diversity and equity policy that we previously had, where obviously it made a claim that there's systemic racism in the school district, which I think was factually incorrect. I think the thrusts of the policies were to look at the race of a kid before we make decisions. I think that's in general a bad thing to do. I think we should try to look at the race of these kids as little as possible and just treat them all the same. So in essence, it wasn't a policy that created equality. So I support removing that previous policy. And this new policy you're bringing in, I know you were going to retool it after the last session, and after reviewing it, I don't see some of the things that I found concerning in the past. So I don't see references to systemic racism. I don't see that the thrust of the policy is to really look through the lens of race. I think I see a policy that you just stated you were trying to make, and that's something that everyone could try to get behind and support, and really is basically thrusting out that we're going to try to take care of each and every kid to the best of our ability. And that is certainly the goal of everyone here. So I think I can probably support this policy. I'd like to hear from the other board members what they think.
Thank you. Ms. Rosario?
Thank you. So I put these two together, the one that you presented previously and the one that you presented now, and they're the exact same thing.
No, ma'am.
The one that I pulled from here, they're the exact same thing with the exception of the removal of the word systemic. So otherwise, everything else is exactly the same. There was no change. You said that you would try to bring forth a different policy. There was some other, that was not the only issue that board members had. Many board members shared that it was redundant, that all of these parts, as I have shared as well, that all of these parts are covered in current policy somewhere else. We have multiple policies that cover the purpose. We have a policy on the SEEA. We have policies on family and student engagement. We have policies on educational access. We have policies on leadership, teaching and learning. I would think that we had policies on that, because otherwise we wouldn't be a school district. And implementation and monitoring and executive leadership from our superintendent, and accountability. And we have policies on all of this already. And so in previous meetings, there were discussions about when we are creating policy, let's not be redundant. I hear that over and over and over again from board members. Let's not be redundant. Let's not repeat what is already in policy let's create new policies or edit the policies that are already established. So other than removing that one word, everything else stays the same. I have concerns about the redundancy. I have concerns about the section eliminate achievement gaps. I have a concern about including, and I said this before, it sets a bad precedence when we are including current legal lawsuits that this school district is engaged in currently within policy, because that can change at any time. The original 2018 joint plan has been revised so many times to now have so many more so many different aspects that the current plan that we are currently looking at and trying to target, set goals for those targets. It's a moving target, actually. It's fluid. It can change at any time. We could be in this lawsuit for 10 years. We could never get out of it. Or we can reach unitary status tomorrow, and then what happens then? The court might actually determine that we should do something else. And so we're including in our policy something that we don't know is long-lasting. And we're supposed to be, from what I heard, focused on not establishing policies that we're going to change over and over and over again, but that would be long-lasting. The other thing that I found in here as well is the word eliminate practices that result in lower academic achievement. I understand the premise behind it, but eliminating the practices assumes that we currently have practices that our staff are engaging in that are purposefully lowering student achievement. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that premise. I have a suggestion, though, so we'll let it go through all, have all board members discuss, but I have a suggestion that I've been mulling around, and I think it might be a good way to get everybody on board to agree to something, but let's just open it up to the others. So those are part of my discussions.
Mr. Mr. Barefoot, thank you.
Uh-oh. You're muted, Mr. Barefoot.
Muted.
Sorry about that. I don't know whether it's thank you or condolences for taking the time to draft this, try and pull everything together. There's a lot of information. Everybody writes differently. I'd love to see a way to, all my executive summary followed by this in bullet point format so that we know, and maybe it's just me, I'm used to that kind of a presentation. The key points here, but I think it's a very good start. Obviously, the idea of having the old policy removed and a new one put in place simultaneously is exactly what we should do. And hopefully between, whether it's May or June, and coalesce around what you've drafted here with whatever are appropriate. We can get that done as soon as possible, certainly before the start of the next week.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barefoot. Ms. Berenborg?
Yeah, what's the policy number again on the one that was previously voted on?
Achievement gap?
Yes. 2260.02. Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Just a minute. 2260.02, the achievement gap policy.
So it's under programming. Yes, I find it. No, I'm talking about the one on, not the one that we're going to repeal, the one that we approved that if we are done with the lawsuit, we're going to keep. That's what I wanted to know. 2130. I know the one we're going to repeal. Okay.
Well, that's up for board vote.
I understand.
Okay.
I shouldn't have said it that way, yeah, thank you. Okay, the reason why I asked that is because, redundancy was brought up. And I don't remember if you remember that I said last meeting, or last workshop, that the parental rights bill was kind of the same way. They brought all of these different bills, law that were already in place and kind of brought them to one place so parents knew all their rights and could go one-stop shopping instead of trying to figure out all the different places to look for what their rights were when they were concerned about their children in school. So I think it's great sometimes that you have a little bit of redundancy because it helps point out to people that one-stop shop. Where can I go where it's already in place somewhere else, but I don't have time and I don't have the ability to know how to get to those things because I'm not in the school system and I don't know how to work this. So to make it easier, I think, for parents and for everyone involved, thank you for doing that. The concern that was brought up about, let me go back to that. The DSEG order being written in there. Is that in the other policy? That was my question. So on that 2130, because that 2130 was written to after the DSEG order is complete, yeah, it's in there. So if we could remove that from this, because, I agree, I don't think you need it there. I get the one-stop shopping, but I don't think we need it there. Remove that, A, because it's already in the other one. Keep everything else there. And I appreciate the fact that you eliminated a couple concerning words for Dr. Posca and that he pointed out. There was one other thing. Oh, I had brought up taking 2130 and kind of propping that up as the addition or replacement of what we were removing. But Dr. Moore said, there were reasons for that not coming forward. But I think it's better if we had gotten both to come forward for us to discuss and vote on. Because that way people have options to look at. So that wasn't done. That was a suggestion I had made, and it wasn't done. So I have no problem with this, absolutely not. And I think what we should do is maybe do those little bit of tweaks after hearing from everybody, and then bring it forward in May. So that way in April's meeting, we can discuss it again if we need to, and then vote on it in May.
So, one of the reasons I didn't look at the achievement gap policy because, that was a huge policy and it's a super majority to make any changes. So, Ms. Barrymore, just so I'm sure, just repeat again your request regarding this.
Regarding 2130?
Well, what you wanted to do as far as a tweak. I saw that you said you wanted to take out letter A under eliminate achievement gaps.
Yeah, you don't need it because it's the very first two sentences of
Okay,
the other,
yes.
policy. It's right there. Achievement
Right.
gap oversight work group. School board is committed to compliance with the 1967 DSEG order. There it is.
Yes, and I think in some policies, we do repeat certain things, but
Yes.
I understand what you're saying there. I just thought that was important as far as,
No, I get it. I just, just to
Okay.
kind of come to an agreement here and
I
get a
gotcha.
5-0 vote.
yeah. I hear
I
you.
see that somewhere, so, and if we don't have a 5-0 vote, we don't have a 5-0 vote, but I think this is an important thing to have a 5-0 vote on.
Thank you. And that's a good point. Dr. Moore, I'm sorry.
Interrupt the board's conversation. Just one point of clarity, the 2018 joint plan is fully in effect. The only changes were the changes in which the two parties agreed upon.
Right.
And
But that's
those,
a lot. That's a lot.
it was the
Excuse me, just a second.
reconfiguration of the equity committee to the work group meeting.
Correct.
The makeup of the specific group.
Correct.
A very clearly defined focus in which we're currently working on.
Right.
So you're right, Ms. Rosario, that is a lot of changes, and it has been a lot of work to really focus the two parties on the specific tasks that we've mutually agreed upon and inform the judge that we would work on, and we are in fact working on. But
We're working very
I didn't
hard,
want to
yeah.
mislead anyone in the community that the 2018 joint plan is null and void. It is absolutely not.
Let me
Go ahead, ma'am. I'm
further
sorry.
with that.
Yeah.
The title of 2130 is the Achievement Gap Oversight Work Group. So there you go. It's taking what you all agreed to and putting it
Right.
into a policy.
Right,
So
and-
I think that's where the DSEG order statement belongs.
Okay.
Because it's in that work group policy.
That's a good point. And I was just going to, what Dr. Moore just said as far as work group, and that work group is working hard, moving along as best we can with the key performance indicators, and we'll continue to work hard on that. Thank you, Ms. Berenborg. Ms. Rosario?
I can support the removal of that. There's a couple of things that I would recommend. Certainly the removal of A from what Mrs. Berenborg just mentioned. I'm going to go back to the first page when it comes back to us, obviously, in May, so that we can look at it again. What I would like to see is the removal of A, B, C, D, and E. And I'll tell you why. Just those letters, you know, that section, those bulleted items. The reason why is because the Every Student Succeeds Act was intended for every student, not just for these specific subgroups of students. There is in E a 25%, it says, in addition to subgroups required by ESSA, Florida includes the lowest performing 25% of students in ELA and math learning gains to encourage schools and districts to focus on providing support. That's talking about Florida State statistic, or, you know, a Florida State, a number for the state. It's not specific to our district. And so if we are, even though I understand that there are achievement gaps with each one of these subgroups, I don't want us to be limited by them. So I want us to be able to support Every Student Succeeds Act without limiting the work of the district for these particular subgroups. Because again, subgroups change. The gaps between these subgroups change. What might happen in a particular subject where one particular subject might be where Black and African American students are high, there's a larger gap between them and Hispanic students versus white students, for example, whereas in another subject, it might be reverse. In another subject, you might have, you know, the gap between the Hispanic students and the maybe white students are higher or bigger than it would be for the Black population. So it all changes depending on grade, depending on subject, depending on age level, depending on where the students come from. Just with that alone, I just prefer to remove these letters from this first section. And that's it, you know, clear up the language, but certainly include Every Student Succeeds. I would also like us to replace eliminate, where there is eliminate achievement gaps. I just prefer to use maybe just close the achievement gap, or another phrase. Eliminate practices, again, that assumes that we currently have practices that we don't have. So I'd rather just use a more positive phrase there. And then if we could also remove the Florida statute from the last page. That's 1001.42. Only because that statute just doesn't seem to match well with this, the creation of this policy. That statute is our general powers, the general powers of the school district. And so much of this policy does not have to do with our general powers. I'd just prefer to remove that and maybe find another statute that better aligns with it, but this particular one does not. Other than that, if those are done, I would be on board and you would have your 5-0.
I can look at the wording as far as closing. I don't have a problem with that, but I do not agree with removing A, B, C, D, and E. That is a part of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, the subgroups that Florida includes for reporting. I just think that's important to put in this because, again, our achievement gap policy dealt with African American. This is for everyone, but we want to look at these safe, respectful, and inclusive education. And I think these 5 points are very, very important, that we list these students, and that's my feeling on that. The eliminate or closing, I could do that one. Ms. Barrenborn?
Sure, yeah, I'm all for positive statements instead of negative ones, so I'm fine with that. I agree with you. I think A through E are important to put in there because that's exactly out of what we have to do when we're interpreting data. This is how, I believe when you were an assistant principal, Mr. Rosario, you were looking at the data by those subgroups. And so those subgroups are really important to make sure that we're hitting every single subgroup like we should. So I think that that should stay.
Dr. Posca, just on those?
No, I think we have a good plan right now, so
Okay.
we'll take a look at some of these changes and we'll see where we're at.
All right, Dr. Moore.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to summarize some of the changes that
Sure.
were made. We can work through some of that. I heard, I am unclear, based on what I've heard, I think we could work through some of these changes and bring it back to the board at our next board meeting.
Okay.
You're unclear, I'm sorry.
I just want to paraphrase. I believe, based on the feedback you all have provided, the volume of changes is not significant. I think we can make those changes. I can send it out to the board to review. You can have one more discussion at the next board meeting, in which you could approve, modify, and send that out for public hearing.
No,
I think-
I'm
I'm
sorry.
just-
Mrs. Barenborg suggested May.
Okay, that's why I'm asking for clarity.
Just wait a minute, just wait. Go ahead, Ms. Barrenborn, thank you for
Yeah.
raising your hand.
I think what I asked for was to discuss it one more time before we vote on it in the
Right.
May meeting.
I would
So
agree with
do we have a workshop in May before the
Yes, ma'am.
business meeting? So perhaps that workshop, we put it there and then is that the same day as the business meeting though?
No.
No,
Okay.
no,
I can't
we'd
remember.
have a middle of the month May
That's right,
workshop.
that's right.
And then
Okay.
we'd have,
So if we could bring it to that meeting and then we can discuss it at a workshop and then we have time to make sure that it's right for the May meeting because we're going to vote on the other policy being removed on the May business meeting, correct?
right now, what the board has asked me to do, and that's another point of clarity, thank you, Madam Chair. It's scheduled to come back to you to repeal at the upcoming board meeting. So if that's not the consensus of the board, then I would need to be advised.
No.
Okay, so you and I discussed in our one-on-one that at some point we had talked about that coming in May.
Right.
At the same time, we're looking at putting this policy in, so they would both go at the same time.
Now, correct, but the item itself that you approved was to send this, you approved the item to send it for public hearing and bring it back in April. Now, I agree, it makes perfect sense if you had a policy that's being repealed and a policy that's being replaced or created that offsets that, it's very clean.
Right.
And if that's the desire of the board, fine, but I'm obligated right now until I hear different to bring back the repeal policy in April because the item said to bring it back April 24th. So I don't
It's
have
already
the
in public
authority.
hearing.
Yeah.
I don't have the authority not to bring it unless the consensus of the board is to bring the two together.
So let me ask this then for a clarifying question. Could we then have the public hearing in April for that policy and then decide to vote on it in May at the same time we look at this policy?
If we brought this policy that's being discussed to be approved at the end of this month, you could send it for public hearing and have enough time, Pam, correct me if I'm wrong, you would have the required 28 days for it to be out to public hearing. So in May, yes, you could approve the new policy that's being created now. If you do this, send it for public hearing in April. Otherwise, you're back to June.
Okay.
All right.
So maybe we need to talk about possibly doing that
I'm sorry,
then.
Pam just, okay, so,
And Dr. Moore, and thank you to the board for your input and consideration. I just think it just would work if the racial equity policy, which is up to be repealed in April, if we move that to May and have this policy ready to be there in case that other policy is repealed. I think it sends a lot of good information to our community. We're just not saying, okay, that one's done, we're not doing anything else. It just, like you said, it makes it a little bit more clean, and it shows that we're working. We're working as hard as we can to follow state statute and to have something for our community. I mean, that's my thinking there. I'm sorry, go Mr. Barefoot.
Chair, question. Just so I understand, we're going to have another time to discuss. Are you suggesting that be during the April business meeting on the 4th, or the May workshop, which I think May 8th?
It'd have to be the April one.
So through the chair, and Pam will
It would
keep
have
me
to be-
straight. If you were able to bring this at our upcoming board meeting in April, which is the end of the month, with the defined changes for discussion and ultimately approval. You all have proven to be very efficient in providing feedback, capturing it, and providing it. I am very comfortable the 5 of you could provide that feedback and have a public discussion regarding the suggested changes. If after you had that conversation, there was a vote, you could then send it for public hearing. The quickest it could come back, because the policy requires that it has to be out for 28 days, would be the scheduled June 12th meeting. So at June 12th, you would be able to officially vote on and approve this policy that you're discussing right now. So the question, if that is fine, we're good, but the question still is on the table, do you want them to come together, which means you would hold the current policy that's out for repeal until June, which is a wait, or is it the desire of the board to schedule a separate meeting within the appropriate time frame to get this done as quickly as possible, which could be a very quick meeting? Completely options on the floor.
Ms. Rosario?
In the spirit of trying to be a team leader here, I mean, a team player. not a team leader,
You already said
a team
you already
player. It just seems too complicated, because we already have a policy out for public hearing. So before I make my comment, Ms. Shattuck, what is the process, or Dr. Moore? You already have, this happened once before, only once before that I can recall in the last, more than 4 years that I have been on the board, where an item was out for public hearing, and within that public hearing, board members made a formal vote to have it pulled from public hearing, but not held off for a vote at a later time. That's different. To have it pulled so no action was made on it, that it would revert to its original state, whatever it was at the time. That was what we voted on some time ago for something. In this particular case, what I'm hearing is an item is out for public hearing. Do we pull it off of public hearing or vote for it at the end of this month and then hold it and then vote on it officially when this item comes to us in June?
So I'm not recommending, and Molly, please correct if we're in gray. I am not recommending that we pull the item. The requirement is, it has to be out for a minimum of 28 days.
I know. And
So
we're almost there.
if it's 28 days, the 28 days passes, and we bring it typically to the very next board meeting. So the way I read the policy is, as long as it's 28 days, whether it be April, May, or June, as long as we exceed the 28 days, we are good. My concern is that the item itself said the board is directing me to post it for public hearing and to bring it back in April. That was at the April board meeting. That's what the item says.
Right.
So
So-
unless the only one that can change the directive from the board is the board.
And we are not at workshops legally allowed to give you official, we cannot, this is not the place for us to give you directive for that. You're gonna have to wait until April because you can pull it up in Sunshine. We are not allowed to give you a formal, make a formal recommendation from a workshop setting on this particular item because it has to deal with an item that's already, obviously in policy and public and in, already in public hearing. We're not making a recommendation like, sure, I can support, you know.
A raise?
A what? Yeah. That's different. And what I'm hearing is that you're looking for an official consensus here on how to move forward, and I don't believe that this is the right place. And we should not be making that decision here. So what I would recommend, leave everything as is. And I hope that I'm not crossing any boundaries here. Leave everything as is because we already have an item out for public hearing. On April, in the spirit of being a team player, bring us back this for discussion and action. We can have a discussion. If it's the way that the board, the majority of the board members like it, we can vote on it on the April meeting. If not, then it doesn't pass, and it'll have to come back to us revised in May. Otherwise, I think we're crossing lines here that we shouldn't cross, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble. Molly, I see you're taking the board.
Thank you, Molly, thank you.
Yes, through the chair. So I was just going to say that something that you could do that I would recommend is if you wanted to postpone it, since you already have voted on advertising it for public hearing to be at the April meeting, that if it stays on that agenda, somebody could at that time make a motion to postpone it to, you know, a specific other meeting. So it could be your May meeting, or I think that's not going to be long enough to re-advertise it. It could be your June meeting, because you would need to advertise it again in the paper with that formality that you're going to now have the public, you know, hearing at the, let's say it's the June meeting, and that just needs to be done 28 days in advance. So you could do that if you wanted to postpone that so that they could be on the same meeting.
Can I
Just
just
a moment.
finish my thought, Mrs.? Can I finish my thought after what she said?
Yes, go ahead.
I think that doing it this way in April, the way that we have it right now, right? Bringing it back to us as an action item based on what we're suggesting to you now, having the board discuss it and vote on it, then you're still taking action on the same evening. We're still taking action on it. When it comes to us 28 days later, it still should be okay because we're still taking action on the same evening. And it can still be announced that there is full support for this on that same evening, regardless of, you know, the 28 days for one, whereas one will get voted, the other one is coming. So let's look ahead, let's be hopeful. There's another new policy coming ahead. We've just voted on, you know, assuming that there's going to be consensus to it, and then moving. So it's still doable.
Ms. Berenborg.
Yeah, question I have is, you know, the reason why the question was about getting this pulled is because of state law changing. So will we be out of compliance if we wait until May?
We don't know.
Through the chair, I don't think the answer is no, it would not be out of compliance. The state is aware that we are taking action. And I've had the opportunity to speak to the chancellor regarding we are in process. They're very satisfied that we're moving forward.
So the other option, which we haven't discussed, would be to have a quick meeting with one item agenda, a business meeting to put it out for the 28-day notice.
And through the chair, I'm fine with that, if that's the desire of the board. I think what Ms. Rosario recommended also works. Have the conversation in April. Once the agenda is the meeting starts, the agenda is turned over to the board members. If there's a board member who wants to make a motion to table the repeal to a specific item, and it's voted on at that time, based on what Ms. Rosario shared and the feedback provided by our attorney, I think that would be the only appropriate way to postpone that vote to align those two items.
Would that be a problem with the state?
No,
That was my
it would not.
question.
No.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're in compliance and we're not in trouble. Okay.
Okay, Dr. Moore, you want to summarize again?
I will leave the agenda as is, and if there's a desire from a board member to make a motion to table and move the repeal item to a other date, then that's the desire of the board. I will work on pushing out the information through you, Dr. Jones, some of the captured highlights, and push out to you as early as tomorrow for feedback to post next Monday, a week from today, so we can have a conversation regarding this particular policy to send to public hearing.
This particular item has already been discussed with all board members, so you can't just send it just to Dr. Jones.
Oh, no.
It should be sent to everybody.
No, I'm sorry, that's not, to everybody.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. And thank you for your working collaboratively to get to a good place.
Thank you.
And still your agenda.
Now, Ms. Berenborg, board protocol for policies amended and created by board members.
Sure. Since we've had a couple of these lately, I thought, we've kind of gotten them thrown at us different ways, and we don't really have a outlined protocol for how a board member wants to bring up an idea for a policy and proceed with it. Sometimes a board member works with staff and they write it, and other board members aren't even aware that that's going on until, boom, it's thrown at us. The board members have been working with staff to create a policy. I think to be fair to all board members on all issues, that we should have some sort of protocol on this. So I have a suggestion, and that's what I'm bringing forward to discuss, is perhaps if a board member has an idea for a new policy, that it's first brought in a workshop. And you bring up your idea and you discuss it with all board members before having staff write it. Because first of all, that's the other thing I'm going to point out, is that we've had staff members taking lots of hours to write policy, and then we turn around and change it all. And now we got another several hours of that staff member's time, again, to write a new policy or change it all. So I think to avoid that in the future and to have less work on your staff, that we first bring it in a workshop, we all discuss it, and at that time we direct the superintendent and the attorney to create the policy and bring it back to the board of whole, not for one board member to write policy. Now that board member and any other board member can give input on the policy, absolutely. I can give you as much input as another board member on any policy. Sure. But I think that that's only fair to do to our staff, because I'm finding that, I'm hearing that staff is working, basically with a board member for hours, and that's taking them off of their other job. So I think just to be fair with that. Then after that first draft, it should come back to the board in a workshop again, where we can talk it through and have another discussion, and then it either moves to a board meeting for a vote, or we all decide that it needs to be tweaked again. It goes back to the staff, to the superintendent, to the attorney, and they do whatever further updates that the board has directed them to do, and then it comes back either to another workshop or it goes right to the board business meeting for a vote. And I just think that if we put that in a protocol, it would make it fair, and everybody knows what the deal is. If you want to make a new policy, here's how you do it. Because I think it's been kind of different. We've had several board members making different policies and working with different people to make those policies. I also think it puts a strain on your staff, and I don't think we should be doing that.
Thank you very much. I think it's a great item. I took as many notes as possible, but maybe you could share those with Dr. Moore so we could look at them, because I think the step-by-step is important. Bring in a workshop, discuss with the superintendent, get the first draft, kind of go through that timeline is a very good suggestion. Thank you.
Well, we were just talking about board protocol, so put it in writing, submit it to the superintendent, and let it come back to the board, and we can fully discuss it then.
It's a good point. It's a good idea. Dr. Pasta?
This is what I'm doing. I'm bringing it for a workshop first before I put that in writing.
No. That was, put it in writing to the superintendent, have the superintendent prepare it, present it to the board, and then the board will discuss. That's what was recommended by Dr. Mr. Barefoot.
Through the chair, I can summarize what we just, summarize what we just
He and I
had
discussed it last week,
to
so.
push out to the board to whether you adopt as one of your protocols, that's fine. I do want to say, although I'm sure my staff appreciates you advocating for them, I come from a place where board members have a staff. And we're a big staff.
We don't. We have a staff of one over
We have
here.
exactly. And you all were elected to
Thank you.
represent our community.
Thank you.
And that's a very, very important job. So providing my staff to you to do your jobs is also their job.
Beautiful.
So I understand it, that this county is blessed with some people who work above and beyond all of the time. So I don't want, and you're right, it is extra work, but it is work we are obligated to do, and we'll do with a joyful heart to make sure that it is absolutely legal, and it can in fact be implemented. So
Thank
they
you.
appreciate it, but I'm
got
going to
it.
make sure you guys can do what you need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Okay, parliamentary, I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Rosario.
I'm glad that you said that, Dr. Moore, because I have worked with your staff on several policies, but here's the benefit of working with them before bringing it to the board. I get the privilege of hearing feedback from the people who are actually doing it before I present it, because in presenting, you also want to do your research, do your due diligence to be able to present to board members a viewpoint that they may not hear. And I get it, like when I'm sitting with Mrs. Dampierre or with somebody else, even with you, Dr. Moore, I often ask you, what do you think? I need your opinion. Because if I don't receive that from you, then I might not be fully vetted, or, fully prepared to present an item. So I think it's important for a board member to to live up to their elected responsibilities. In this particular way, one of our major responsibilities is policy. And to be able to talk about all new policies first before, and I get the idea, I get the premise, but I think bringing it to board member, I think having the flexibility of, because there have been opportunities where we have said, hey, we just thought about why don't we create a policy for that? And then at that point it was discussed first, and then we went to board, to district staff. But then there were other times where it's kind of walked through. I do get, though, that when board members are working with staff on a policy, that other board members are not aware of that.
Correct.
That part, maybe there could be an update, maybe an email like, by the way, a board member is currently working on a policy regarding blank. More information will be provided to you as I receive it. Maybe something like that might be good to give us all a kind of heads up.
Sunshine?
Because it might not actually, I don't know, oh yeah, sunshine.
Sunshine.
Yeah, I don't know. Well,
Don't make me
maybe
go
not
into it.
really, because he's not mentioning, well, we'll let Ms. Shattuck, maybe not. But, at some point, I get that part of it, because I would like to be prepared in advance as well. And so that might be a fine line. So maybe I'll withdraw that until you speak, but I do appreciate being able to work with staff. I always try not to make it a burden if it's not a time-sensitive issue. I'm always, board members, very concerned to say, you know what, this doesn't have a timeline, so let's just do it whenever you have a chance. There's never been an issue, to my knowledge, that it has been an extreme burden on staff. They've always been very welcoming and very, let's work together on this, whatever the case may be. So, sorry, Ms. Shattuck.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Shattuck.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So with regard to Sunshine, Sunshine requires two-way communication or communication between board members. So if it was the superintendent, let's say, or a member of staff communicating, the superintendent's been working on this policy with the board members, attach the policy, or maybe just give you the idea of a policy on XYZ, you know, and then you would have a heads up about that, and then it could be brought to your workshop where you could discuss it, because you can only discuss things in the sunshine. So there would be that opportunity for a one-way communication. You would just have to be careful after you receive, you know, the one-way communication. For example, if it's an email, don't reply all, things like that. So there's no two-way communication about it outside of the sunshine.
So it could be doable.
Ms. Berenborg?
I just don't want to make this superintendent a conduit. And that is a very gray area, I think, when you come to sunshine. That's why I'm proposing this way to do it. I'm not saying a board member can't work with staff to write policy. That's
you
not what I'm
did.
saying.
Wait,
No.
no,
What
I
I'm
said come
saying-
to us first.
No,
Wait a minute, wait to
can I
be
speak?
recognized. Thank you. Ms. Berenborg?
What I'm saying is, I think there should be an order to it. So the first, let's say you have an idea for a policy. Let's say you want all board members to wear jeans and T-shirts on Friday. That's going to be a new policy, right? I'm sure they'd love that. So, you know, I think to be, as a courtesy to the other board members, I might bring that up. Let's say I wanted to bring that as a policy. I might bring it up at this workshop and say, I have an idea for a policy. I'd like to work with staff on it. I'm giving you all that heads up. And it's done in the sunshine. It's on camera. Everybody knows that we're discussing this, and there's going to be further discussion about it. It's not all of a sudden, boom, I wrote a policy with staff. And because sometimes I do hear about the policies that are being written, and, you know, then I ask him about it. And now I'm wondering if that's a conduit. I'm making him a conduit, and I don't want to do that. So I just think to be fair and to keep everything in the sunshine and be fair to all board members, that we know what's going on. I think just taking 4 steps. Present your idea first at a workshop. Just say, I'm going to do a new policy on this. And we're all like, sure, go for it. And then you write that policy, or you talk to the superintendent and the attorney. We all agree, yes, we'd like to give input on it. We give input, because then you didn't do all that work and then have us all voted down.
Right.
And I think that's happened. So what a waste of your time, what a waste of the board's time, what a waste of staff's time. So just to save time, I think going through these 4 steps and being courteous to your board members and saying, hey, I'm going to work on a policy, here's what it is. I'm going to give it to the superintendent and to the attorney, and I'll give them input, you guys give them input, and then it'll come back to us at the next workshop. I think that's just a fair way to do it. I'm not saying you can't write policy with a staff member. I'm just saying there should be an order to this, because there have been times where I found out about it later that I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not prepared now. And I felt like that's kind of not fair to a board member. So just to be fair to everybody, I think doing it in 4 steps where we really vet it, it goes to a workshop, discuss it, goes back, comes back, goes back, and then we vote on it. I think it's fair to everybody.
Very good, concrete sequential steps. All right, anything else? And we're going to the last item, parliamentary procedure training.
Madam Chair, I just placed this on the agenda for the board to discuss.
Okay.
Mr. Fagan pushed out a request for letters of interest. I just wanted to ensure that with the board norms on the criteria, if it's still a desire of the board, before moving forward. So it's for the board to discuss.
I do have a couple things on this. Thank you to Ms. Rosario for bringing this up with certified parliamentarians. I did make contact with 3 of them, and one of them allowed me to participate in one of the workshops for free, which was cool. And when I look at board protocols, I see that the attorney is our parliamentarian. We pay our attorney. We're looking at, trying to keep a tight budget. So obviously I can take a couple extra classes, take a look at those. One of the first things I said as board chair is, if I make a mistake, let me know. I'm not trying to do that, but so I'm going to contact the person myself, pay for it myself, and take a couple classes. So I would participate rather on an individual training myself instead of a whole training that requires more board time and money. That's my thought.
So with regard to, thank you, Mr. Fagan, for this. I appreciate putting this out. The one suggestion that I have is on the first page, there are numbers 4 and 5 are empty. They're just blank. Are those to be removed? I'm sorry, Roman numeral 2, section A, number 4 and 5. It's on page 1.
got background, accept rules of governing, requirements of actions and deliberation.
It's under scope of services.
Yes, I have 4 items, 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Where do
Then
you
on
have 4? I have 1, 2, 3, and then 4 and 5 are blank, and then 6 was requirements for action, and that's it.
Yours is different than mine.
You have the better version.
Uh,
Oh, here, that's okay. Do you have another copy?
Yes, yes. I'm gonna give
Okay.
you mine.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, this is definitely.
Thank you.
Okay, so
through the
may I-
chair. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so the fourth, number 4, says requirements for action and deliberation. The understanding of the training, let me back up. Requirements for action and deliberation are not the only aspects of Robert's rules as an entire meeting is conducted. There are many aspects of Robert's rules throughout a meeting, not just those for action and not just those that we're deliberating. So, however, requirements for action and deliberation is already understood within number 2, which are the accepted rules for governing meetings. I mean, that just falls underneath that. So I would just remove 4, because I don't want anyone to just think that that's the only thing that they're doing. They're actually going to cover all of the rules for us. That's my recommendation. Under primary qualifications, B, which is on the next page, number 2, what we talked about before was a professional, registered, or certified parliamentarian. Not just someone who's certified to train, but someone who is professionally certified or professionally registered. They make a big difference, because many of those who are professionally certified and professionally registered, they are registered with different organizations. There's one called the Florida State Association of Parliamentarians, and they are vetted through that organization. There's another one, which is the National Association of Parliamentarians, and there are specific exams that one would have to take in order to become a professionally registered parliamentarian. Someone who's certified could have gotten certified at, a local business or an online whatever that's probably not vetted, and we want to make sure that we get the highest quality person in to train us. Otherwise, what's the point of having the training, right? If you have a heart attack, you go to a cardiologist. If you have, a plumbing issue, you go to a plumber. You don't really want to kind of leave your plumbing to someone who says, sure, I know how to do that, and then you don't really know, right? In this particular case, I think it's really important for all of us to get quality training and be able to have access to that person. And I just want us to be able to have someone who's professionally certified or professionally registered.
Through the chair, yes, ma'am, we made
Thank
those
you.
changes.
Thank you, Ms. Rosario. Ms. Berenborg?
Do you have a ballpark figure of how much this would cost?
To the chair, no, ma'am, we've never done something like this before.
I do. I mentioned it last time.
What was it?
I think it was like 100. I can't remember now, but it was something like 100, and at least the person that I recommended last time, $125 an hour, something like that.
And how many hours?
3 or 4 hours.
All right.
Dr. Posca?
That was just for the person that I spoke to, by the way.
I mean, I think I'm generally supportive of it. If we can find a time, maybe on one of the Mondays that we're already going to be getting together, and we can fit it in, I think it would be beneficial.
Thank you. Mr. Barefoot?
I have no problem.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, on the certified to train, maybe we can make that a little bit more specific. In other words, state your certifications or your qualifications for being trained. That way, board members can ascertain whether or not they're a plumber or a handyman or, whatever. That way, we can kind of get an idea of, the qualifications of the person that's coming forward.
Through the chair, yes, we can make that more of an, so we'll add an item, we'll make it one, show me where you're certified, professionally certified and registered, and then two, maybe give me a narrative of how you would conduct the training.
Okay,
That
that'd be
way,
great.
that way you could get an idea of what they might do.
I thought there was a place in here that already included that.
There should be, when they give table of contents, an outline of training, yes, ma'am, right underneath tab 1, underneath submittals.
That's not what I'm referring to. What I'm talking about is where she's saying, what's the certified to train. In other words, state the certification that you have. And
Okay.
then we'd need to know, what does that mean?
Gotcha.
Because I don't know, like if somebody says I'm certified to be a parliamentarian versus I'm certified to train people for parliamentaries understanding, that's different.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Any other comments? Okay, Dr. Moore, I think that's it unless some other board member has anything else you'd like to bring.
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
I went to Tallahassee, and I was up there for, gosh, I don't know, a week, 10 days, something like that. And I did get into a lot of offices. Things are moving very, very fast up there. The legislative update that came out from, I think yesterday or today from Mr. Bass that you forwarded is good. And it's talking about the budgets, which is interesting because the House, that's where they are right now, is that they're talking about budgeting because we're 4 weeks from sine die, which is the last day of session. So those budget talks are really important to pay attention to because HB1 that already passed and the governor signed, that's going to affect, that's going to be interesting how that plays out in the budgets. And looking at the preliminary budgets right now, the House and the Senate versions are totally different in how HB1 is going to hit us.
Yep.
So it's quite interesting to see watch how those two mesh together, I think. There were a couple other things I noticed that pretty much minds were made up on certain things on our priority list, but as I looked through the priority list, a lot of things were already happening, which was good. They were good things. They were already in HB1 actually on a couple of things we had on our priority list. Then a couple other things like transportation costs. Those were things like I hit with some people and said, and this was interesting because a lot of senators and state reps didn't realize that not only are we underfunded already with transportation, but our district tries to do like school choice fund transportation, and that costs us more money to do. And when I brought that up, they were very interested in hearing, wait a minute, you do school choice transportation, how do you do that? And so when I explained a little bit about the bus TPO thing that we're trying to do, the answer was, okay, how do you go about doing that? Where are you taking the money from? I said, I don't know, you're begging, borrowing it from other buckets. So the question is, how can we help you do that better? So it was, look at the budget. So when we get through this budgeting process, it's going to be interesting to see where HB1 fits into transportation. Right. It'll be interesting, because that was something that was brought up a lot. The other thing I wanted to just focus on is I had brought up in our last workshop about a gifted education presentation. Okay, thank you.
One thing, Dr. Moore, that I keep hearing and kind of follows what Ms. Berenborg said, once we get everything settled on budget, how will vouchers affect our school system? I don't know if that's going to be part of our budget when we talk about that, but a lot of parents have been asking that. Will we lose teachers? What's going to happen? Will our smaller schools going to combine? So when do you think we'll be talking about that? I know once the budget's approved, but.
Through the chair, at our upcoming workshop, we will have the initial budget conversation, which will be kind of where the budget currently sits, not necessarily the budget we're currently working in.
Okay.
But kind of forecasting as to where we think the budget would be. That would include possible impacts to House Bill 1 or any other modification or changes. I can do that both at workshop or maybe even during my presentation in the evening at the end of May, because ultimately session should be over
Okay.
by then.
A lot of concerns, thank you. Anyone else?
I do, in talking about policies, what I realized recently was that we do not have a policy on district strategic plan. And it was completely shocking to me. So I talked with Dr. Moore about it briefly today, and you know, I'm going to actually work on that with him, hopefully.
I'm going back to my 4 steps. You're bringing it forward to the board. I know, but you're bringing it forward to all of us.
Well,
to
only
tell us
because
that.
we're
Thank
having
you.
the conversation now, but not, no. Only because we're having the conversation. And I happen to have it here in front of me. So I kind of pulled from some other districts. I pulled one from Miami and one from Osceola. And it's strange to me that we have a district strategic plan that, you know, we know is priority for us and drives every decision, and yet we don't have a policy about it. I know that's going to come forward to you sometime soon, hopefully. Other than that, there are 2 other policies, since we're in that discussion area, none of which have a time limit on. One is just kind of something that we all talked about when we were doing our legislative priorities, that we don't have a timeline. You know, we kind of, every year it seems like, well, this year happened to be, you know, kind of crunch time so that we could be prepared for presenting it to our representatives. We weren't ready with it. But if we were to just, you know, we already have a legislative policy. If we just added wording in there that, you know, says that by a certain time we should begin talking about our legislative priorities, and maybe by December we could have our final draft and voted in January. So this way we're ready, you know, before any legislative session. But just, I mean, nothing else other than just the timeline for that. Obviously, there's no crunch on it at this point.
Yes, ma'am.
Was there another one? I forgot the other.
Well, let me talk about timeline on that a little bit.
Okay.
When a representative or senator says, senators can put forward as many bills as they want. Representatives are limited to, I think, 6. So, sorry, I don't mean to turn my back on you. Timing is everything. And if there's something that we want that's a new, like, let's say it's an appropriations bill. We would like money maybe for the Graves Project or something like that. That is something that I think is a priority that we should take as a separate item and bring it forward and discuss early if somebody has that inclination, because just so you know, the legislative process changes every year, every other year. So it's an election year, so it was a later legislative calendar. Next year, they start up in September. So it's a quick turnaround from this year to next year for legislative purposes, which means that if we have something that we want to bring to one of our representatives, we should be talking about it already.
Right.
And so that way, we can get it in their ears before September, because September is when committee meetings start, and that's when they already have their bills kind of lined up and ready to go. They add bills too, but like, especially for Representative Brackett, he only gets 6. So his 6 are going to be his priority. And if we want something like that, we need to talk about it soon so that we can get it on their radar in August. So
I'm okay with
that's
that.
something to know.
So with you
I'm okay
being
with
there,
that.
Ms. Berenberg, do you think of anything now, after you listen to everything, what we should be talking about right
The
now?
appropriations bill, or appropriations money maybe for the Graves Project.
Okay.
Because we've talked, he and I have talked about that separately. I know that, you know, board members have gone out and tried to help with any fundraising. Mr. Barefoot's done a lot of that. And I don't want to step on those shoes, but if there's money that could be raised for, as a private, there's a lot of private public stuff going on. So if we could get appropriations for part of it and donations for the other part, we might be able to put it all together and do it. So that was the other thing, is if we could look at maybe where, and you've got to be strategic about this. You've got to look at where have other appropriations that have been put out there actually gotten funded, because there are some that everybody puts forward, but we know they're not going to get funded. They just get put on there so that it looks good and they're on there. But if you really want it to get funded, you got to look at other ones and say, what has gone through before that works? And let's see if we can get that portion, like the track or whatever.
Right.
Let's see if we can get that part of it through appropriations funding versus donations, because the money keeps going up on the cost of everything, as we know, and that's part of why this hasn't gotten running as fast as we'd like it to run, because of the cost of everything. So if we can maybe help with trying to do a public-private combination, that might work.
Thank you. Anything else, board members? Thank you for all of your comments, input.
Nope.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Barefoot. Oh, you said no, okay. All right.
Nope.
Anything else, Dr. Moore? Okay. We'll adjourn the meeting at 2:50. Thank you.